Single Dad 8 from Trash Behind Restaurant, the vlogger filming him, had 20M subscribers, but when the camera stopped rolling, she realized the man she exposed wasn't a beggar. He was about to change the lives of millions, including hers. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The neon sign of Ruby's Diner flickered weakly against the darkening Tennessee sky. Behind the building, where the yellow security light cast long shadows, Eli Turner's hands trembled not just from the cold, but from shame. His breath came out in small, visible puffs as he stood before the industrial dumpster, its metal surface slick with evening frost. He pulled his thin jacket tighter, the worn fabric doing little against the biting wind. The jacket, like everything else he owned, had seen better days. Its threads were fraying at the edges, much like the remnants of his pride. "Just this once," he whispered to himself, though it wasn't the first time he'd said those words this week. Just until something comes through. The sound of cars passing on the nearby street made him flinch. Each headlight that swept across the parking lot sent his heart racing. He'd worked at Ruby's for 2 years, served countless plates of meatloaf and apple pie, with a smile until last Thursday when Marie, the owner, had called him into her office with tears in her eyes. "Budget cuts," she'd said, unable to meet his gaze. "I'm so sorry, Eli." Now, here he was, on the other side of the dumpster, looking for dinner. His stomach churned, but not from hunger. The thought of his daughter Gracie waiting at Mrs. Henderson's house next door made his chest ache. She'd asked this morning why they were having cereal for dinner again. Eli closed his eyes briefly, remembering her small face. "Lord," he breathed, "I know I've got no right to ask for much, but please, just help me feed my girl." With trembling fingers, he lifted the heavy lid of the dumpster. The smell of discarded food wafted up, not entirely unpleasant, mostly fresh from the day's service. His eyes caught sight of a paper bag near the top, relatively clean and unopened. Inside, he found a half-eaten chicken sandwich and a generous portion of fries, barely touched. "Thank you," he whispered upward, carefully wrapping the food in a clean napkin he'd kept in his pocket. He'd tell Gracie it was takeout, a special treat. She didn't need to know where it came from. A metallic clang made him jump. He whirled around, heart pounding, but it was just a cat knocking over an empty can. Still, the sound reminded him he needed to hurry. Mrs. Henderson would be expecting him to pick up Gracie soon. His fingers, numb from cold, fumbled with another promising bag. This one contained most of a turkey wrap, still fresh enough to eat. More than enough for both of them tonight. The relief that flooded through him made his knees weak. "Just temporary," he assured himself, though the words felt hollow in the cold air. "Something will come through. Has to." The past week had been a blur of job applications and rejected phone calls. Too qualified, not qualified enough, no positions available. The rent was already late, and his savings, what little he'd managed to put aside, had gone to keeping the lights on. Eli carefully placed the food in his backpack, making sure nothing would get crushed. He'd heat it up at home, make it look nice for Gracie. She deserved better than dumpster scraps, but it was better than another night of hunger. A sharp gust of wind cut through his jacket, and he shuddered. The temperature was dropping faster now, the night settling in with its familiar weight. In the distance, a car door slammed, making him flinch again. He needed to move quickly. Being caught like this would be more than his fragile pride could bear. His hands shook as he zipped up the backpack. The fabric was worn thin, just like everything else in his life seemed to be lately. He remembered how different things were just a year ago. A steady job, a small but comfortable life, dignity intact. Across the parking lot, hidden in the shadows of a parked car, Lena Morales adjusted her camera's focus. The small red recording light blinked steadily as she captured every moment of Eli's desperate search. Through her viewfinder, she watched him pause to wipe his eyes with the back of his hand. "Perfect," she whispered to herself, zooming in on his hunched shoulders. This was exactly the kind of raw, real footage her subscribers craved. She could already see the thumbnail. A father driven to desperation, digging through trash to feed his child. The title would write itself. Eli straightened up, checking his surroundings one last time. His shoulders were tense, his movements quick and nervous like a startled deer. He didn't notice the camera's red light blinking in the darkness. Didn't see Lena crouched behind her car with her lens trained on his every move. The security light cast harsh shadows across his face, highlighting the exhaustion etched into every line. He looked older than his years, worn down by circumstances he never could have predicted. His wedding ring caught the light as he adjusted the backpack strap, a small glint of gold that spoke of better days. "Sorry, Sarah," He whispered to the night air, a private moment between him and the memory of his late wife. I promised to take care of her, but his voice trailed off, lost in the wind. The cold was becoming unbearable now. Eli pulled his jacket closer, though it did little good. He took one last look at the dumpster, shame and gratitude warring on his face. Then, squaring his shoulders, he began the walk to Mrs. Henderson's house, each step heavy with the weight of his circumstances. Lena's camera followed his retreating figure, capturing every weary step. The red light continued to blink, recording a story she was certain would touch millions. What she couldn't record was the prayer Eli whispered with each step, a desperate father's plea for a better tomorrow. Just help me keep her fed, Lord. Just help me keep her safe. That's all I ask. Please. The night grew colder, the wind sharper. Eli disappeared around the corner, carrying his scavenged dinner and what remained of his dignity. Behind him, the dumpster stood as a silent witness to his desperation, its shadow stretching long across the empty parking lot. In the darkness, Lena lowered her camera, the red light still blinking. She had her footage raw, real, and heart-wrenching. Everything her viewers would want to see. What she didn't yet know was how this simple act of recording would change not just Eli's life, but her own. The morning sun filtered through thin curtains, casting weak shadows across the worn carpet of the small apartment. Eli Turner's eyes opened slowly, his back stiff from another night on the old couch. He'd given Gracie the only bedroom when Sarah passed. The springs creaked as he sat up, running a hand through his short dark hair. "Daddy, look what I made!" Gracie's voice carried from the kitchen table, bright and clear as a bell. She sat surrounded by her colored pencils, her small legs swinging beneath her chair. Eli's heart squeezed at the sight of her. Even in their struggles, she remained his ray of sunshine. Her dark pigtails bounced as she held up her drawing proudly. "What have you got there, sweetheart?" He walked over, his joints protesting from the night's dumpster dive. "It's you!" She pointed at the stick figure wearing what looked like a cape. "See? You're fixing everything, like you always do." Eli swallowed hard, studying the childish illustration. In Gracie's drawing, his stick figure self wore a big smile, tools floating around him like magic wands. If only fixing things were that simple. "That's beautiful, baby girl." He kissed the top of her head, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. "You hungry for breakfast?" "Starving," she declared, adding another star to her drawings corner. Eli moved to the coat rack, carefully retrieving the paper bag he'd hidden in his jacket pocket the night before. His fingers brushed against the grease-stained wrapper inside. "Look what I brought us," he said with forced cheerfulness, pulling out the salvaged burger and fries. "Yummy!" Gracie clapped her hands. "From Ruby's? I love their fries." "Sure is." The lie tasted bitter in his mouth. He divided the food onto 2 plates, giving her the larger portion. "Just needs a quick warm-up." As he placed the plates in their ancient microwave, 3 sharp knocks echoed from the door. Eli tensed, his mind jumping to the overdue rent notice sitting on the counter like a ticking bomb. "Eli Turner, open up, young man!" The familiar voice of Mrs. Darlene Whitaker carried through the thin door. Relief flooded through him. "It's just Mrs. Darlene," he told Gracie, who had looked up with worried eyes. He opened the door to find their elderly neighbor standing there, her silver hair perfectly set despite the early hour. She clutched a large covered pot in her hands, the smell of homemade soup wafting through the hallway. "Good morning, Mrs. Darlene," he said politely. "Don't you good morning me?" she replied, though her eyes were kind. "I made too much soup yesterday, and my arthritis is acting up something fierce. You'd be doing me a favor taking some off my hands." Eli recognized the lie for what it was, a gentle fiction to preserve his dignity. His cheeks warmed. "That's kind. But we're okay. Just had breakfast, actually." "Hi, Mrs. Darlene," Gracie called from inside. "Are those your magic beans?" The elderly woman's face lit up. "Sure is, sugar. The very same soup that made your daddy grow so tall when he was just a boy next door." Eli shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Darlene, I appreciate it, but..." She fixed him with a stern look that reminded him of his own mother. "Now you listen here, Eli Turner. Pride won't keep a child full, honey." Her voice softened. "The Lord provides through his people sometimes. Don't you go turning away his provisions on account of your stubborn pride." His eyes burned as he glanced at the rent notice on the table. Final notice glared back in bold red letters. The weight of everything, the job loss, the mounting bills, the fear of failing Gracie, pressed down on his shoulders. "Thank you," he whispered, accepting the pot with trembling hands. Mrs. Darlene patted his arm. "You're a good father, Eli. The Lord sees that." She peered around him to wave at Gracie. "You eat up all those magic beans, young lady. They'll make you strong like your daddy." After Mrs. Darlene left, Eli stood in the kitchen, staring at the soup pot. The rich aroma made his stomach growl, reminding him how little he'd eaten lately. Behind him, Gracie hummed while coloring, content in her innocent world where Daddy could fix anything. "Time to get ready for school, sweetheart," he called, forcing steadiness into his voice. They went through their morning routine, teeth brushing, hair combing, backpack checking. Eli helped Gracie into her worn but clean coat, zipping it up against the morning chill. "Got your homework?" he asked. "Yep, and I'm gonna show Miss Jenkins my drawing of you." "That's nice, baby." He gathered her lunch bag, empty except for some crackers and the last apple from their fridge. They walked hand in hand to the bus stop, Gracie skipping every few steps. Other parents and children gathered there, some offering polite nods. Eli noticed a few whispered conversations, quick glances. Had they seen him behind Ruby's last night? The yellow bus rumbled around the corner. Gracie turned to him, throwing her arms around his waist in a fierce hug. "You're my hero, Daddy," she whispered into his jacket. Eli forced his lips into a smile, running a gentle hand over her hair. Inside, his heart cracked a little more, knowing heroes shouldn't have to dig through dumpsters to feed their little girls. The bus doors opened with a hydraulic hiss. Gracie bounded up the steps, turning to wave from her window. Eli kept his smile firmly in place, waving back until the bus disappeared around the corner. Only then did he let his hand drop, along with the mask of cheerful strength he wore for her sake. The morning air felt colder somehow, as he stood alone at the bus stop, a father trying desperately to be the hero his daughter believed him to be. Lena Morales sat at her editing desk, the glow of 3 monitors casting blue light across her modern Nashville apartment. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard as she reviewed the footage from earlier that night. The man's silhouette moved quietly through the darkness behind Ruby's diner, his movements careful and deliberate. She zoomed in on his face, weathered but dignified, illuminated briefly by the security light. His eyes held a weight she couldn't quite describe. The timestamp showed 9:47 p.m. "Perfect," she whispered, cutting away the excess footage. Her channel, Acts of Real Life, had covered homelessness before, but something about this felt different. This wasn't just another nameless face on the street. This was a father trying to feed his child. The editing software hummed as she added soft background music. Nothing too dramatic, just enough to underscore the moment. Her usual intro graphics appeared. Acts of Real Life presents. Then the footage began to play. She watched it again. The man checked over his shoulder before reaching into the dumpster. His hands trembled slightly as he retrieved what looked like half-eaten sandwiches and fries, wrapping them carefully in napkins. The security light caught his face again. This time she could see him mouth what appeared to be a prayer. Lena's finger paused over the delete key. Something didn't feel right, but this was news, wasn't it? This was real life. This was what her channel was about, showing the truth that people needed to see. She typed out the title, "Single Dad Eats from Trash America. Are we watching?" "Upload," she muttered, clicking the button. It was just past midnight. She stretched and walked to her kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water. The city lights twinkled through her floor-to-ceiling windows. Her apartment felt too big suddenly, too empty. Her phone buzzed. The video was processing. By 3 a.m., she couldn't sleep. The video had only been live for 2 hours, but the numbers were already climbing. 50,000 views. 100,000. The comments section exploded. "This breaks my heart. What's wrong with our country? Fake. Everything's fake these days. Someone help him." Lena pulled her knees to her chest, scrolling through the responses. Local news stations were already reaching out through her website contact form. Good Morning America wanted to know if she had more footage. By sunrise, the video had hit 1 million views. Her phone wouldn't stop buzzing with notifications. She watched as social media platforms picked up the story. Twitter threads analyzed every detail of the footage. Someone had already identified Ruby's diner from the sign in the background. "The way he wrapped that food so carefully," one tweet read. "That's a father's love right there." But there were other comments too, cruel ones. People questioning why he didn't go to a food bank, suggesting he was scamming, calling him names that made her stomach turn. Lena paced her apartment, coffee growing cold in her hand. The morning shows were running the story now. She could see her footage playing on multiple networks, their anchors discussing poverty in America with perfectly concerned expressions. This viral video, captured by social media influencer Lena Morales, shows the heartbreaking reality. She muted the TV. The man's face stayed with her, that quiet dignity, the careful way he moved, like someone trying to remain invisible. She hadn't caught his moment of prayer in the final edit. It felt too private somehow. Her phone rang. Her manager, excited about the viral hit. "This is huge, Lena. We're talking mainstream coverage. Your subscriber count is exploding. We should do a follow-up piece." "I need to think about it," she interrupted, surprising herself. "Think about it? This is your biggest video yet. The ad revenue alone?" She hung up. The morning sun filled her apartment now, but she felt cold. Opening her laptop again, she scrolled through more comments. The view count had passed 3 million. A notification popped up. Someone had started a GoFundMe for the dumpster dad. Others were trying to identify him, sharing screenshots from the video. His story was spreading like wildfire, spinning beyond her control. "He deserves better than this," she whispered to her empty apartment. The man's prayer echoed in her mind, a private moment she'd invaded with her camera. Her eyes caught on a comment that had gathered thousands of likes. "Someone find this man. He deserves help." Lena felt a lump form in her throat. She closed her eyes, seeing again how tenderly he'd wrapped those leftover fries like they were precious gifts for someone he loved. Her chest tightened with an unfamiliar feeling. Guilt? Responsibility? She opened her channel's analytics. The video was trending in multiple countries now. 5 million views. Her subscriber count had jumped by hundreds of thousands overnight, but the numbers felt hollow. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her keys and phone. She had to go back to that town, had to find him. Not for content, not for views, but because that quiet dignity deserved more than becoming just another viral moment. Eli Turner stood in the checkout line at Morton's Grocery, clutching a half-gallon of milk and counting out crumpled dollar bills. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the linoleum floor. He kept his eyes down, the way he always did these days, but something felt different. The usual quiet of the small-town store had shifted to whispers and stolen glances. A middle-aged woman in front of him kept turning around, her eyes wide with recognition. Eli shifted uncomfortably, wondering if he had something on his face. When he reached for his wallet, the cashier, Jenny, according to her name tag, touched his hand gently. "Sir, your milk has been paid for," she said softly. Eli blinked. "I'm sorry?" "The lady who just left." She covered it. Jenny pointed toward the automatic doors where a woman was hurrying to her car. "She said to tell you to stay strong." Before Eli could process this strange encounter, a large man in overalls approached him, arms outstretched. "Brother, you're him, aren't you? The trash dad hero?" Eli stepped back, but wasn't quick enough to avoid the bear hug that followed. The stranger's embrace was warm but suffocating, smelling of tobacco and motor oil. "God bless you, man. You're what America needs to see." "I think you have the wrong person," Eli managed, extricating himself from the man's grip. His heart hammered in his chest as he grabbed the milk and headed for the exit. More eyes followed him, more whispers. Someone took a photo with their phone. The walk home felt endless. 3 more strangers stopped him. One asking for a selfie, which he declined. 2 others offering him money, which he also refused. By the time he reached his apartment complex, his hands were shaking so badly he could barely grip his keys. Mrs. Darlene was waiting outside his door, her iPad clutched to her chest like a shield. Her usually cheerful face was creased with concern. "Eli, honey, we need to talk." "Mrs. D, I've had a really strange morning." "I know why, child." She followed him inside, her sensible shoes clicking on the worn linoleum. "You better sit down for this." The apartment was quiet, except for the hum of the old refrigerator. Sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, highlighting the wear on their second-hand furniture. Eli set the milk on the counter and sank into his favorite armchair, the one he'd kept after Sarah's accident because it still held her shape. Mrs. Darlene perched on the edge of the couch, tapping at her iPad with determined fingers. "Now, don't you get mad at me for showing you this, but you need to know what's happening." She turned the screen toward him. Eli's blood ran cold as he saw himself in the grainy nighttime footage, illuminated by the security lights behind Ruby's diner. The camera zoomed in on his face as he carefully wrapped half-eaten food in napkins, his movements desperate but deliberate. The view count showed millions. The comment section was a flood of emotions: sympathy, outrage, calls to action. Someone had already started a GoFundMe page in his name. Eli's hands trembled as he held the iPad. The world tilted sideways as he watched his private shame become public spectacle. Every careful lie he'd told Gracie, every moment of quiet desperation he'd hidden from the world, exposed in high definition. "They're calling you a hero," Mrs. Darlene said softly, "for doing what you had to do for your girl." "I'm not," Eli's voice cracked. "This isn't." The sound of small feet padding down the hallway made them both freeze. Gracie appeared in her favorite purple pajamas, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Her dark curls were wild from sleep, so much like her mother's that it made Eli's chest ache. "Daddy?" She squinted at the iPad screen. "Why are you on TV?" The innocent question hit him like a physical blow. Eli looked at his daughter. The reason for every choice, every sacrifice, every moment of swallowed pride, and tried to find words that wouldn't shatter her world. "Because sometimes, baby," he managed, closing the tablet with careful fingers, "the world looks where it shouldn't." A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the thin walls came the sound of car doors slamming, voices calling out, equipment being unloaded. Mrs. Darlene went to the window and peeked through the curtains. "Oh Lord," she whispered, "the news vans are here." The afternoon sun cast long shadows through the dusty windows of Eli's small apartment. News vans still crowded the street outside, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metal flowers. Eli had drawn the curtains, trying to shield Gracie from the constant flash of cameras and curious onlookers. A soft knock at the door made him tense. Gracie looked up from her coloring book, her eyes wide with uncertainty. "Daddy?" "Stay behind me, sweetheart," Eli said quietly, moving toward the door. His shoulders were tight with tension, but his movements remained gentle and controlled. The same calm demeanor he'd maintained through countless military operations and life's hardest moments. When he opened the door, he found himself face to face with a young woman holding a modest bouquet of yellow daisies. She wore simple jeans and a sweater, but something about her seemed polished, practiced. Her dark hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, and an expensive camera hung from her shoulder. "Mr. Turner?" Her voice was softer than he'd expected. "I'm Lena Morales." Eli's jaw tightened. He felt Gracie peek around his legs, and his protective instinct flared. "The one with the camera," he said flatly. Lena's confidence seemed to waver. She shifted her weight, extending the flowers awkwardly. "I came to apologize. I'm the one who. I filmed you that night." "I know." Eli didn't reach for the flowers. "Mrs. Darlene showed me the video." "May I? Could we talk?" Lena glanced down at Gracie, who was studying her with innocent curiosity. "Please?" Eli hesitated. The hallway behind Lena was mercifully empty. She'd come alone, without a crew. After a long moment, he stepped back, allowing her inside, but keeping himself between her and Gracie. The apartment was small but tidy. Gracie's drawings covered one wall, bright splashes of crayon hope against peeling wallpaper. Lena's eyes lingered on a sketch of what looked like Eli in a superhero cape. "Gracie," Eli said gently, "why don't you color in your room for a bit?" "Okay, Daddy." Gracie gathered her crayons, giving Lena one more curious look before disappearing down the short hallway. Once they heard the bedroom door close, Lena spoke quickly. "I never meant for this to blow up the way it did. I run a channel about real-life stories, and when I saw you that night..." She paused, seeming to realize how it sounded. "I thought I was helping, showing people what's really happening in their own towns. By filming a man at his lowest moment?" Eli's voice was quiet but sharp. "Without asking? You're right." Lena set the flowers on the coffee table. "It was wrong, but something incredible has happened because of it. People want to help, Mr. Turner. Thousands of them. They've been asking how to donate, how to support you and Gracie." Eli's expression hardened. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Lena insisted. "It's people recognizing someone who deserves better. A veteran, a single father doing everything he can for his daughter." She pulled out her phone, showing him comments from her video. "Look, these are real people, moved by your story. They see your dignity, your strength." Eli's hands clenched at his sides. The battle was visible on his face, pride wrestling with the reality of empty kitchen cabinets and overdue bills. "My story isn't for entertainment." "Then tell it your way," Lena said softly. "Let me interview you, the real you. No tricks, no editing. Just your truth, in your words." She gestured to her camera. "People already care. They just need to know how to help properly." "And what do you get out of this?" Eli asked, years of hard experience making him wary. Lena's professional facade cracked slightly. "A chance to make this right. To use my platform for what it should have been used for in the first place. Connecting people who want to help with those who deserve it." From down the hall came the sound of Gracie humming to herself as she colored. The simple, sweet sound seemed to fill the room, reminding both adults what was really at stake. Eli moved to the window, pulling the curtain back slightly. The news vans were still there, waiting. His reputation was already out there, twisted and simplified into viral content. But maybe one interview, he said finally, turning back to Lena. Honest and straight, no dramatics. Just your story, Lena agreed quickly. However you want to tell it, and if it helps set things right. Eli glanced down the hallway where his daughter played, then back to Lena. If it might help others in similar situations, that's all I'm asking for. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Eli extended his hand. Lena shook it, and her camera's power light blinked red in the dim room. A small, steady pulse, like a heartbeat. Tomorrow? She asked. I can come back when you're ready. Eli nodded, already wondering if he was making the right choice. But the thought of Gracie's future, of maybe finding a way forward that didn't involve dumpster diving or sleepless nights, it had to be worth the risk. Tomorrow, he agreed, and opened the door to let her out. Lena sat in her editing room, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. The raw footage of Eli's interview filled her screen. No fancy effects, no dramatic music, just him, sitting in his modest apartment, speaking from the heart. I never wanted to be famous. Eli's voice came through clear and steady. I just wanted to keep my little girl fed. As she watched, Lena felt the same emotion she'd experienced during the interview. Eli Turner wasn't trying to be inspirational. He simply was. The video went live at noon. By 1 o'clock, it had 100,000 views. By dinner time, 1 million. The comments poured in faster than anyone could read them. This man is everything that's right with America. I'm crying. How can we help? A real father, a real hero. Local news stations picked up the story immediately. Channel 5's evening broadcast led with, America's Dad, the truth behind the viral video. The reporter's voice cracked as she described Eli's journey. 3 years ago, the reporter said, Eli Turner lost his wife Sarah in a tragic car accident. Today, he's showing us all what real strength looks like. The interview revealed everything Eli had tried to hide. How he'd worked 3 part-time jobs until the economy turned. How he'd sold his wedding ring to pay for Gracie's school supplies. How he still volunteered at the veterans shelter despite barely having enough for himself. Sarah always said faith wasn't about having everything. Eli had told Lena during the interview, his eyes distant but clear. It's about having enough to share even when you think you don't. A GoFundMe page appeared. Then another. And another. Within hours, the total crossed $50,000. By nightfall, it reached 6 figures. Ruby's Diner changed their sign to read, Welcome home, Eli. The owner, Tom Martinez, hadn't slept well since laying Eli off. Now he had a chance to make it right. The morning shift is yours, Tom told Eli, his voice gruff with emotion. Full benefits this time. Should have done this long ago. Eli tried to protest, but Tom wouldn't hear it. You're good for business, he said with a wink, and good for the soul. Lena found herself driving back to the small town almost daily. She told herself it was for follow-up footage, but the truth was simpler. Something about Eli and Gracie's quiet faith touched a part of her she thought she'd lost. Miss Camera, Gracie would call out whenever she arrived, running to hug her legs. Did you bring your magic box today? Sure did, sweetie, Lena would answer. Though more often than not, the camera stayed in her bag. Instead, she found herself sitting at their small kitchen table, sharing meals and stories. She watched Eli teach Gracie to say grace before dinner, his worn hands holding his daughter's tiny ones. She saw him help Mrs. Darlene with her groceries. Even when he was bone-tired from his shift, she witnessed his quiet thank you notes to every donor, no matter how small the amount. Why do you write to all of them? Lena asked one evening, watching him address another envelope. Because kindness deserves kindness back, he said simply. That's what Sarah would have done. The transformation of their lives happened gradually but surely. The overdue bills disappeared one by one. Gracie got new shoes. The apartment's broken heater was finally fixed. But Eli didn't change. He still drove his old truck, still wore his worn jacket, still helped at the shelter. The only difference was the smile that came easier now, the worry lines that softened around his eyes. One evening, after a long shift at the diner, Eli found Gracie drawing at the kitchen table. The picture showed 3 figures, a tall one labeled Daddy, a small one labeled Me, and a middle one with what looked like a camera labeled Miss Lena. That's beautiful, sweetheart, he said, his heart catching at the sight. Do you think Mommy would like Miss Lena? Gracie asked suddenly, looking up with those eyes so like her mother's. Eli paused, caught off guard by the question. I think, he said carefully, your mommy would like anyone who makes you smile like that. That night, after reading Gracie her bedtime story, a new book, donated by a kind stranger, Eli knelt beside her bed. The moonlight filtered through the window. casting a soft glow on his daughter's peaceful face. "Maybe things are turning around, baby girl," he whispered, tucking her favorite blanket around her shoulders. Gracie's eyes fluttered open briefly, and she murmured sleepily, "God's fixing it, Daddy." The morning sun filtered through the threadbare curtains of Eli's small apartment, casting warm patches on the worn carpet. He sat at the kitchen table, sorting through bills and letters, while Gracie hummed softly, coloring at the coffee table. The past week had been surreal, strangers stopping him on the street to offer help, the diner giving him his job back, and donations appearing in a GoFundMe account Lena had set up. A white envelope caught his eye, the formal letterhead making his stomach tighten. As he read the first few lines, his hands began to shake. The legal language was dense, but the message was clear. His in-laws wanted custody of Gracie. "Daddy?" Gracie looked up from her coloring book, her brown eyes curious. "Are you okay?" Eli quickly folded the letter, forcing a smile. "Just fine, sweetheart. Keep coloring that picture's looking beautiful." He stepped onto the small balcony, pulling his phone from his pocket with trembling fingers. Lena answered on the second ring. "Eli, what's wrong?" Her voice was warm with concern. "They want to take her." His voice cracked. "Sarah's parents, they've hired a lawyer. They're saying I can't provide for her." "I'm coming over," Lena said without hesitation. "Don't do anything. Just wait for me." 20 minutes later, Lena arrived, her dark hair windblown and her face flushed from rushing. Mrs. Darlene appeared moments after, as if summoned by some neighborhood distress signal. The elderly woman took one look at Eli's face and went straight to the kitchen to make tea. They gathered around the kitchen table while Gracie continued coloring, oblivious to the adults' tension. Lena read the letter carefully, her journalist's eyes scanning every detail. "They're citing the viral video as evidence," she said, her voice tight with guilt. "They're using it to show financial instability." "This is my fault," Eli whispered, running his hands through his hair. "I should have found another way. Should have asked for help sooner." Mrs. Darlene reached across the table and grabbed his hand. "Now you stop that right there, Eli Turner. Ain't nobody's fault but this broken world's. And last I checked, being poor ain't a crime." Lena pulled out her phone, scrolling through contacts. "I know someone at Legal Aid. They help families like yours all the time, Eli. We're not letting this happen." "They never cared before," Eli said, his voice hollow. "Sarah's parents, they cut her off when she married me. Said an army mechanic wasn't good enough for their daughter. Haven't even met Gracie since she was a baby." Mrs. Darlene's face hardened. "Well, ain't that convenient? Now that you're in the spotlight, they suddenly want to play grandparents?" Gracie wandered over, sensing the tension. She climbed into Eli's lap, her small hands wrapping around his neck. "Why do you look sad, Daddy?" Eli held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "Just grown-up stuff, baby. Nothing for you to worry about." Lena made the call to Legal Aid, stepping onto the balcony to talk. Mrs. Darlene busied herself in the kitchen, muttering prayers under her breath as she washed dishes that didn't need washing. "They can see us tomorrow morning," Lena announced, coming back inside. "The lawyer says we need to gather character references, proof of your improved employment situation, and documentation of their previous absence from Gracie's life." "I've got photos," Mrs. Darlene piped up. "Every birthday, every Christmas, just you and Gracie. I'll testify myself about what a good daddy you are." Eli nodded, his throat tight. "Thank you, both of you." They spent the next hour making plans, gathering documents, and listing potential witnesses. Mrs. Darlene dug through her phone, finding pictures of Eli volunteering at church events with Gracie. Lena started drafting a media statement, just in case. "We should pray," Mrs. Darlene announced suddenly, reaching for their hands. Lena hesitated for a moment before joining the circle. "Lord," the elderly woman began, her voice strong and sure. "We know. You didn't bring Eli and Gracie this far to leave them now. If you bring you to it, you'll bring you through it. Amen. Amen," Eli whispered, clinging to that thread of faith. As evening approached, rain clouds gathered outside. Lena reluctantly left to prepare for tomorrow's meeting, promising to pick them up in the morning. Mrs. Darlene hugged Eli fiercely before going home, leaving behind a casserole and her unwavering support. Eli went through their bedtime routine mechanically, helping Gracie brush her teeth and picking out her favorite pajamas with the unicorns. As he read her usual bedtime story, his voice caught on the words, "Daddy?" Gracie touched his cheek. "You don't have to finish if you're tired." He pulled her close, his heart aching with love for this gentle, perceptive child. "I'm never too tired for you, baby girl." After the story, he tucked her in, making sure her stuffed elephant was properly positioned. She fell asleep quickly, peaceful and trusting, while Eli sat in the old rocking chair by her bed, watching her chest rise and fall. Car headlights swept across the room through the blinds, illuminating Gracie's innocent face for a moment. Eli leaned forward, his voice barely a whisper. "They'll never take you from me." Outside, thunder rumbled across the Tennessee sky. A storm was coming. Morning sunlight filtered through the rain-soaked trees as Eli Turner climbed the worn steps of the small law office on Main Street. His work boots left damp footprints on the wooden floors. The brass nameplate on the door read, "James Hargrove, Attorney at Law," in simple lettering. Inside, Mr. Hargrove's office smelled of old books and coffee. The lawyer sat behind a heavy oak desk, his reading glasses perched on his nose as he studied the custody letter. His weathered face creased with concern. "I won't sugarcoat this, Mr. Turner," Hargrove said, placing the letter down. "Your in-laws have deep pockets and connections. They've hired Caldwell and Ross from Nashville, one of the best family law firms in the state." Eli's shoulders tensed. "But they can't just take her because I'm poor, right?" "No, but they'll try to prove you're unstable." Hargrove leaned forward. "That viral video? They'll spin it their way. Say you're desperate, unable to provide. They'll dig up everything. Your job losses, the late rent, even your time in the army." Eli's throat tightened. "I've never hurt Gracie. Never let her go hungry." "I believe you," Hargrove said softly. "But courts look at stability. These folks will paint you as a struggling vet who can't keep a job. They'll use the media attention against you." The morning light caught the dust motes dancing between them. Eli rubbed his face, feeling the stubble under his palms. "What can we do?" "Document everything. Show you're a good father. Keep receipts, take photos, maintain a diary of your daily routine with Gracie." Hargrove paused. "And maybe consider using that media attention to your advantage." As if on cue, a gentle knock came at the door. Lena Morales stood there, her camera bag slung over her shoulder. She'd been waiting in the lobby, having driven Eli to the appointment. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, "but I might have an idea." Hargrove gestured for her to enter. "Miss Morales, your video started all this, and maybe another video can help fix it," she said, sitting beside Eli. "What if we showed people who Eli really is? Not just a few minutes behind a diner, but his whole story?" Eli shifted uncomfortably. "Like what?" "A mini documentary series, 3 or 4 short episodes showing your daily life with Gracie. You working, helping with homework, making dinner together." Lena's eyes lit up. "Real moments that prove what an amazing father you are." "The court might not care about YouTube videos," Hargrove warned. "But public opinion matters," Lena countered. "If we can show everyone the truth, it'll be harder for them to paint Eli as unfit." Hargrove considered this, tapping his pen against the desk. "She has a point. The grandparents want to try this in the court of public opinion? We can meet them there." Eli stared at his calloused hands. "I don't know, putting Gracie in the spotlight more." "We'll be careful," Lena assured him. "No exploitation, no dramatic music or fancy editing. Just honest moments of a father and daughter. We'll let the truth speak for itself." Hargrove nodded slowly. "It could help. Shows you're willing to be transparent, nothing to hide." Eli thought about Gracie's smile that morning as she showed him her math homework, about their nightly prayers and weekend pancake traditions, about all the small moments that made their life together precious, even when times were hard. "Okay," he said finally, "but we do this right. No staging things, no scripts." "Of course," Lena agreed quickly. "Just real life." They spent the next few hours planning. Hargrove made notes while Lena outlined her ideas. They would film Eli at work, showing his determination to provide. Capture homework time, where he patiently helped Gracie with multiplication tables. Document their volunteer work at the veteran shelter, proving their connection to the community. That afternoon, they began filming. Lena's camera followed Eli as he fixed Mrs. Darlene's leaky faucet, his hands steady and sure with the wrench. She captured him, helping Gracie practice spelling words at the kitchen table, their heads bent together over her notebook. The camera caught small, precious moments. Eli tucking a flower behind Gracie's ear at the park, their shared laugh when he burned the edges of their grilled cheese sandwiches, the way he always kissed her forehead before she boarded the school bus. As evening fell, Eli sat alone on his small front porch, watching lightning bugs dance in the yard. The air was heavy with the lingering scent of rain. He heard footsteps and turned to see Lena approaching, her camera safely packed away. "Thank you," he said quietly as she settled into the chair beside him, "for believing in me when you didn't have to." Lena's smile was gentle in the growing darkness. "Maybe we both needed something real." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge, one by one, above the Tennessee trees. The morning sun cast long shadows across Ruby's diner as Eli arrived for his morning shift. He paused at the entrance, noticing something different. A mason jar sat by the register, already half full of dollar bills and change. A handwritten sign read, "Help our Eli, every penny counts." His throat tight. Sarah, the morning waitress, rushed over and hugged him before he could protest. "Don't you dare say no," she said, wiping her eyes. "We're family here." Throughout the morning, customers kept adding to the jar. Some left extra tips with notes saying, "For Gracie." Others simply squeezed his shoulder as they passed, their eyes full of understanding. Eli struggled to keep his composure as he worked, overwhelmed by the kindness. Around noon, 3 men in veteran caps walked in. They sat in his section, ordered coffee, and waited until he had a moment. The oldest one, wearing a Vietnam veteran's cap, spoke first. "Turner," he said gruffly. "I'm Bill Jenkins from the VFW Post. These are Mike and Dave. We heard about your situation." Eli's hands trembled slightly as he refilled their cups. "Sir, I appreciate it, but..." "No buts, son. We take care of our own." Bill pulled out a business card. "My daughter's a family court lawyer. She wants to help, pro bono." Mike, wearing a Desert Storm cap, added, "My wife's got boxes of clothes from our granddaughter, Gracie's size. They're yours if you want them." Eli had to turn away for a moment, pretending to wipe down the counter. When he faced them again, his eyes were red, but his voice was steady. "Thank you," he managed. Throughout the day, more veterans came. Some ordered food, others just stopped to shake his hand. Each one had something to offer: legal advice, job leads, or simply their support. Word had spread through the veteran community like wildfire. Lena captured it all from a corner booth, her camera running quietly. She watched as Eli's stoic facade cracked slightly with each new act of kindness. His shoulders gradually relaxed, and his smile became more genuine. During his break, Eli disappeared for an hour. When he returned, he told Lena he'd been at the local veterans shelter, fixing their broken heating unit. "Least I could do," he said simply. "Got skills. Might as well use them." This became a pattern. Between shifts at the diner, Eli would head to the shelter. He'd fix whatever needed fixing: loose doorknobs, squeaky beds, flickering lights. Lena followed with her camera, documenting how the man who needed help couldn't stop helping others. The shelter director, a retired Marine named Marcus, watched Eli work one afternoon. "Man's got golden hands," he told Lena, "and a bigger heart than most." Gracie started coming along after school. She'd sit at a table in the shelter's dining area, doing her homework while Eli worked. Soon she was helping serve meals, her small hands carefully balancing paper plates as she walked between tables. Lena caught beautiful moments between father and daughter, Eli teaching Gracie how to use a screwdriver, Gracie drawing pictures for the shelter residents, both of them praying before meals with the veterans. These weren't staged moments for the camera. They were genuine glimpses of love in action. One evening, as Eli worked on fixing a broken bed frame, Lena noticed how he explained each step to Gracie. His voice was patient, his hands gentle as he showed her how to tighten bolts. "See this part here, sugar?" he said, pointing to a loose joint. "Sometimes things break, but that doesn't mean they can't be fixed. Just needs the right tools and a little care." Gracie nodded seriously. "Like how God fixes broken hearts, Daddy." Eli paused, his hand stilling on the wrench. "Yeah, baby, just like that." Lena felt her own heart twist at the exchange. She'd been spending more time with them than strictly necessary for the documentary. Something about their quiet strength, their unwavering faith, despite everything, touched something deep within her. She found herself looking forward to their small interactions: Eli's quiet "thank you" when she brought coffee, Gracie's excited waves when she arrived with her camera, their shared glances when something touching happened at the shelter. But she kept these feelings carefully contained, focusing instead on capturing their story. As the day wound down, Eli surprised Gracie with a used bicycle he'd fixed up at the shelter. It was pink and white, with streamers on the handlebars, donated by one of the shelter volunteers. Gracie's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. They moved to the empty parking lot behind the diner. The setting sun painted everything in soft gold as Eli held the back of the bike, running alongside while Gracie pedaled. Her laughter echoed across the asphalt, pure joy in the sound. "Don't let go, Daddy," she called. "I've got you, baby girl," he assured her, though he'd already released his grip. She was riding on her own, wobbling slightly but staying upright. When she realized she was doing it herself, her smile could have lit up the whole town. "Daddy, look at me. I see you, sugar. You're doing great. Lena filmed from a distance, not wanting to interrupt this precious moment. Through her viewfinder, she watched father and daughter bathed in golden light, Gracie's hair flying behind her, Eli's face transformed by pride and love. This wasn't the broken man from the viral video. This was a father in his element, teaching his daughter to soar. She lowered her camera and whispered, "This is the real America." The evening settled softly over the small Tennessee town, painting the sky in gentle strokes of purple and orange. On Eli's modest front porch, the smell of warm cornbread mingled with the summer air. Lena sat in one of the two weathered wooden chairs, watching as Eli carefully placed 3 mismatched bowls of steaming soup on the small folding table between them. "It's not much," Eli said, his voice carrying that familiar note of humility, "but the cornbread's fresh." "Are you kidding?" Lena smiled, setting her camera aside for once. "This is perfect." Gracie bounced on her toes near the porch steps, her eyes wide with wonder as tiny lights began to dance in the gathering dusk. "Daddy, look! The fireflies are back!" "Go get your jar from the kitchen, sweetheart," Eli called, and Gracie darted inside, her footsteps pattering across the wooden floor. Lena watched the little girl return with an old mason jar, holes carefully punched in the lid. "I used to catch fireflies when I was her age," she said softly, "back in Georgia, before we moved to the city." Gracie skipped down the steps, her giggles floating back to them as she chased the blinking lights. Her small hands cupped the air gently, trying to catch the magical creatures without hurting them. "Careful near the street, baby," Eli reminded her, his eyes never leaving his daughter, even as he broke off a piece of cornbread. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching Gracie's joyful pursuit. The soup was simple, chicken and stars from a can, but the cornbread was golden and crumbly, clearly made with care. "This reminds me of Sarah," Eli said suddenly, his voice quiet. "She loved evenings like this. Used to say God painted the sky extra pretty in Tennessee." Lena set down her spoon, sensing the weight of the moment. "Tell me about her?" Eli's eyes stayed on Gracie, but his mind seemed to drift back. "She was a kindergarten teacher. That's how we met. I was doing maintenance work at her school after my second deployment. She had this way of seeing the good in everything. Even when I came back different after Afghanistan, she just loved harder." The fireflies blinked around them like earthbound stars. Gracie's jar already held 3 or 4, their lights pulsing like tiny heartbeats. "The accident happened so fast," Eli continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Black ice on the highway. I was still overseas. Didn't even make it back for the funeral." He pressed his lips together, fighting back the emotion. "But Gracie, she saved me. Having her to come home to, it gave me purpose." Lena felt tears prick at her eyes. Her camera sat forgotten beside her chair, but for once, she didn't reach for it. Some moments weren't meant to be filmed. "I understand," she said softly. "About loss, I mean. My mom." She paused, surprised at herself for wanting to share. "She died when I was 15, cancer. I prayed so hard, every single day. And when she's still," Lena wiped quickly at her eyes. "That's when I stopped believing." Gracie's laughter floated up from the yard, pure and untouched by the weight of their conversation. "The fame made it worse," Lena admitted. 20 million subscribers, and I never felt more alone. Everyone wanted the peppy, perfect vlogger, the girl who could turn anything into content." She gave a hollow laugh. "I started my channel to help people, to show real stories, but somewhere along the way, you lost your way," Eli finished gently. "Yeah." Lena watched as Gracie carefully released one of her fireflies, smiling as it blinked away into the darkness. "I stopped feeling God completely. Started thinking maybe Mom was wrong about all of it. The prayers, the faith, everything." The crickets had begun their evening chorus, a soft backdrop to their conversation. Eli broke off another piece of cornbread, considering his words carefully. "When I was in Afghanistan," he said, "there were nights so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. No stars, no moon, nothing. But we knew the sky was still there." He gestured toward Gracie, who was now sitting cross-legged in the grass, watching her fireflies with wonder. "Faith isn't about feeling God," he said softly. "It's about trusting He's there, even when you don't." Lena lifted her eyes to the emerging stars above them, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. The truth of his words settled deep in her heart, touching a place that had been closed off for so long. The morning sun filtered through the courthouse's tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished floor. Eli Turner stood in the hallway, adjusting his navy blue tie with trembling fingers. The suit he wore, his only one, felt tight around his shoulders, a reminder of the years since he'd last needed it at Sarah's funeral. "Here, let me help," Lena said softly, stepping forward to straighten his tie. Her usual camera was absent today, replaced by a quiet determination in her eyes. "Remember what Mr. Hargrove said, just be yourself." Eli nodded, his throat too tight for words. Down the hall, he could see reporters gathering, their cameras and microphones ready like weapons. The sight made his stomach churn. Mrs. Darlene appeared, holding Gracie's hand. The little girl wore her Sunday best, a pink dress with white flowers that their elderly neighbor had helped iron that morning. "Daddy!" she called out, running to hug him. Eli knelt down, wrapping his arms around his daughter. The familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo steadied his nerves. "Hey, princess," he whispered. "Remember what we talked about? You just need to sit quietly with Mrs. Darlene, okay?" Gracie nodded solemnly. "I brought my special picture," she said, clutching her folded drawing. "Can the judge see it? Mr. Hargrove will show it if he thinks it helps," Eli assured her, forcing a smile. The courthouse doors opened, and people began filing in. The room was packed: local residents, veterans from the shelter, and what seemed like every reporter in Tennessee. Camera flashes popped like lightning, making Eli wince. Then he saw them: Sarah's parents, looking exactly as he remembered. Margaret and Richard Conway sat rigidly on the opposite side, their expensive clothes and perfect posture a stark contrast to his worn suit. They didn't even glance his way. Their lawyer, a sharp-featured man in an Italian suit, was arranging papers with practiced precision. The sight made Eli's hands cold with sweat. "All rise," the bailiff called out. Judge Martha Wilson entered, her gray hair pulled back severely, reading glasses perched on her nose. The preliminary hearing began with the Conway's lawyer painting his picture. His voice dripped with carefully crafted concern as he spoke. "Your Honor, Mr. Turner, while perhaps well-intentioned, has demonstrated severe instability. A man reduced to searching through garbage for food cannot provide adequate care for a child." Eli felt each word like a physical blow. Beside him, Lena's hand found his arm, squeezing gently. "We have a man," the lawyer continued, "living off internet charity, with no stable employment history since leaving the military. His viral fame is hardly a foundation for child rearing. The Conways can provide Gracie with private schooling, regular meals, and the stability she deserves." Mr. Hargrove stood next, his weathered face calm. "Your Honor, if I may present evidence of Mr. Turner's capability as a father." He nodded to the court clerk, who wheeled in a small TV. Lena's documentary footage began to play. The courtroom watched as scenes unfolded, Eli helping Gracie with homework late into the night, the two of them volunteering at the veterans' shelter, cooking simple meals together, while Gracie practiced multiplication tables. "Stop," Eli could be heard saying in one clip. 7 times 8 is 50, 6, remember? Like the cards we made? Gracie's giggle echoed through the speakers as she corrected herself. More clips played Eli fixing a neighbor's fence in exchange for used school supplies, teaching Gracie to ride her bike in the parking lot, praying with her before bedtime. Each moment captured the quiet dignity of their love. "Furthermore," Mr. Hargrove said, producing a folder, "I have statements from teachers, neighbors, and local business owners attesting to Mr. Turner's character and dedication as a father. And this," he held up Gracie's drawing, "was created by Gracie herself." The colorful crayon drawing showed 2 stick figures, one tall, one small, surrounded by tools and hearts. Above them, in careful child's writing, "Me and Daddy fixing everything." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Wilson studied the drawing carefully. "Mr. Turner," she said, "would you like to address the court?" Eli stood slowly, his legs unsteady. He cleared his throat, looking not at the judge, but at Gracie. "Your Honor, I know I'm not perfect. I know I've struggled. But everything I do, everything I am, is for her." His voice grew stronger as he continued. "When my wife died, I promised her I'd give Gracie all the love in the world. Some days that love looked like leftover food. Some days it looked like telling stories instead of buying toys. But every single day, it looked like trying my best." The courtroom was silent now. Even the reporters had stopped writing. "I'm not ashamed of what I did to feed my daughter," Eli said. "I'm only ashamed I couldn't do more. But I'm learning, I'm working, and with God's help, I'm getting better every day." Judge Wilson removed her glasses, studying Eli intently. "Mr. Turner, I've seen many custody cases in my time. Some parents fight for their children out of pride, others out of spite, but rarely do I see such pure devotion. She glanced at the Conways, who sat stiffly in their chairs. While the grandparents' concern is noted, I see no evidence of neglect, only a father's sacrificial love. Therefore, I am granting temporary custody to Mr. Turner, pending a 6-month review. The gavel struck with finality. For a moment, Eli couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then the courtroom erupted in cheers. Mrs. Darlene was crying, Gracie jumping up and down beside her. Lena threw her arms around him, her professional distance forgotten in the joy of the moment. "You did it, Eli," she whispered, her eyes bright with tears. Eli hugged her back, his voice rough with emotion. "No, we did." The neon sign of Ruby's Diner cast a warm glow across the parking lot as cars filled every available space. Inside, the usual smell of burgers and fries mixed with the sweetness of fresh-baked cookies that Mrs. Darlene had brought for the occasion. Paper streamers hung from the ceiling fans, and someone had taped hand-drawn hearts to the windows. Gracie's artwork, recognizable by the crooked stars and rainbow colors. Eli stood near the counter, looking somehow both uncomfortable and deeply moved by the attention. His work uniform had been replaced with a clean button-down shirt, and though it was slightly worn at the collar, his quiet dignity made it look like Sunday best. Every few minutes, someone would pat his back or squeeze his arm, and he'd respond with that gentle smile of his, the one that started in his eyes before reaching his mouth. Gracie twirled around in her best dress, her hair clip catching the light every time she moved. She hadn't stopped touching it since Lena gave it to her, treating it like a precious crown. "Daddy, look!" she called out for the 100th time, spinning so the sparkles would dance. "Miss Camera says I look like a princess." "You sure do, baby girl," Eli replied, his voice soft with love. He watched her weave through the crowd of townspeople who'd shown up to celebrate, her joy infectious. Lena stood by the jukebox, her camera capturing moments with careful discretion. She'd learned over the past weeks when to film and when to just let moments be. Tonight, she mostly let the camera rest at her side, wanting to be present in the celebration rather than just document it. Ruby herself, the diner's owner, brought out another tray of mini sandwiches. Her eyes were red from crying happy tears all evening. "Speech," she called out suddenly. "Eli Turner, you get up here and say something." The crowd took up the chant, "Speech, speech." Their voices filled the small diner with warmth and encouragement. Eli shook his head at first, but Gracie grabbed his hand and pulled him toward the counter. "Please, Daddy, tell them about the angels." He cleared his throat, looking down at his daughter's eager face. The room quieted, waiting. Mrs. Darlene reached over and squeezed his shoulder, giving him courage. "I'm not much for speeches," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "And I'm sure not used to standing in front of folks like this." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "A few weeks ago, I was behind this very diner, looking for food in places no father ever wants to look." His words carried no shame now, just honest truth. "I thought God had forgotten about me and my little girl." Gracie wrapped her arms around his waist, and he placed a gentle hand on her head, careful not to disturb her precious hair clip. "But maybe," he continued, "he was just waiting for me to open the door again. See, sometimes help comes from places you'd never expect." His eyes met Lena's across the room. "Sometimes it comes through a camera lens that shows you your own truth. Sometimes it comes through neighbors who bring soup." He nodded at Mrs. Darlene, who dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "Sometimes it comes through a whole town deciding that one little family matters enough to fight for." People nodded, several wiping away tears. Ruby hadn't stopped crying since he started speaking. "My wife," his voice caught slightly, but he pressed on. "Sarah used to say that faith isn't about seeing the whole staircase, just taking that first step. I took that step behind this diner, though I didn't know it at the time. And you all, you've been the handrail holding me up every step since." The crowd broke into applause, but Eli raised his hand slightly. "Just one more thing," he said. "To everyone here who donated, who prayed, who showed up in court today, thank you doesn't seem enough, but it's what I have to give, along with a promise to pay it forward every chance I get." The applause this time was thunderous in the small space. Several veterans in the corners stood at attention, offering silent salutes. Ruby rushed forward to hug him, nearly knocking over a tray of cookies in the process. As the crowd moved toward the food tables, someone put a quarter in the jukebox. A slow country song filled the diner, its gentle rhythm matching the peaceful atmosphere of the evening. Gracie tugged at her father's sleeve. "Dance with me, Daddy, like we used to with Mommy." Eli's eyes softened at the memory. He took his daughter's small hand and led her to an open space near the windows. She stood on his feet, just like she used to when she was smaller, and he began to move in slow circles. Lena lifted her camera, capturing the tender moment. Through her lens, she watched Eli whisper something that made Gracie giggle. The sparkly hair clip caught the light, creating tiny rainbows on the wall behind them. Other couples joined the dance floor. Mrs. Darlene with one of the veteran regulars, Ruby with her husband, but Lena kept her focus on father and daughter. The neon sign outside painted everything in a soft pink glow. Through the windows, the stars were just becoming visible in the darkening sky. Inside, the diner hummed with conversation, laughter, and music. For this one perfect moment, all the shadows had retreated, leaving only light and hope and love. Gracie's head rested against her father's chest as they danced, her eyes closed in complete trust and contentment. Eli's face showed a peace that had been missing for so long, the peace of a man who had walked through fire and found himself surrounded by angels on the other side. Lena's phone buzzed with notifications before dawn. She grabbed it, squinting at the screen through sleepy eyes, then bolted upright. Her heart sank as she scrolled through an endless stream of hostile tweets and messages. Fraud alert. America's favorite homeless vet isn't even a veteran. Number Eli Turner lied. The tweet had thousands of shares already. Below it, someone had posted blurry photos claiming to show inconsistencies in Eli's service record. Lena's hands trembled as she dialed Eli's number, but it went straight to voicemail. She threw on clothes and rushed to her laptop. The comment section of her latest video about Eli had exploded overnight. Hateful messages filled the screen. Can't believe we all fell for this scam. Another fake story for views. Shame on you, Lena. He probably wasn't even homeless, just acting for the camera. Lena's email inbox dinged. 3 major sponsors had already pulled their support from her channel. Their carefully worded messages all contained the same sentiment. They couldn't risk being associated with potential fraud. Her phone rang. It was Jerry, the diner owner. Lena, have you seen what's happening? His voice was strained. I've got reporters calling nonstop. My regulars are threatening to boycott if I keep Eli on staff. Jerry, please, Lena pleaded. These are just baseless accusations. We can't let... I'm sorry, he cut her off. I had to let him go this morning. I can't afford the bad press. My business won't survive it. Lena's throat tightened. She'd brought this spotlight on Eli, and now was burning him. She posted a passionate defense of him on Twitter, sharing what she knew of his character and integrity. Within minutes, the replies were vicious. Of course you're defending him. You made money off his lies. Lena Morales exposed as a fraud enabler. Both of them played us for fools. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it was Mrs. Darlene. Honey, there are news vans outside Eli's apartment. The elderly woman's voice quivered. He won't answer his door. I can hear Gracie crying inside. Lena grabbed her keys and raced to her car. The morning traffic crawled as her mind spun with guilt and worry. She'd wanted to help Eli, to show the world his quiet strength. Instead, she'd made him a target. When she reached Eli's street, cameras and microphones greeted her. Reporters swarmed her car. Lena Morales, did you know Eli Turner was lying? Was this all staged for views? How do you respond to allegations that you exploited a fake story? She pushed through them, ignoring their questions. Mrs. Darlene met her at the building entrance, wringing her hands. They've been here since sunrise, she whispered. Poor Gracie was too scared to go to school. Lena knocked softly on Eli's door. It's me, she called. After a long pause, she heard the lock click. The apartment was dark, blinds drawn against the chaos outside. Gracie sat at the kitchen table, coloring with shaking hands. Eli stood by the window, his back rigid with tension. His phone lay face down on the counter, probably filled with missed calls and messages. I'm so sorry, Lena started, but Eli shook his head. Not your fault, he said quietly. Should have known it was too good to be true. His voice carried no anger, just a deep weariness that broke Lena's heart. On the table lay his termination notice from the diner. Next to it, an email from his lawyer warning that this scandal could affect the custody case. Lena pulled out her phone, ready to fight back, but Eli gently pushed it down. Don't, he said. They'll just twist your words too. Outside, they could hear reporters calling questions through the windows. Gracie flinched at each raised voice, her crayon moving in nervous circles. We'll fix this, Lena insisted. I'll find your service records, prove them wrong. They don't want proof, Eli interrupted softly. They wanted a story about hope, and now they want one about lies. Truth doesn't sell as well as scandal. He walked to his bedroom and returned with something in his hand. His old military dog tags, the metal worn smooth from years of handling. The sight of them made Lena's chest ache. Here was the proof, simple and solid, of his service and sacrifice. Yet social media had already decided he was guilty. Eli sank into a chair, the tags dangling from his fingers. The morning light caught the engraved letters of his name and service number. Outside, another news van pulled up, its satellite dish reaching toward the sky like an accusing finger. "They believed everything," he whispered, his voice rough with pain as he stared at his military tags. "Everything, except the truth." Gracie looked up from her coloring, her young face pinched with worry. "Are we in trouble again, Daddy?" Eli sat there in the growing darkness, silent, unable to answer his daughter's simple question. The morning sun cast long shadows through the apartment windows. As Eli Turner stared at the bright pink paper taped to his front door, his hands trembled as he read the eviction notice, each word hitting him like a physical blow. 30 days to leave. The landlord's scrawled note at the bottom explained that other tenants were threatening to move out because of all the media circus and unwanted attention. Eli pressed his forehead against the cool metal door, trying to steady his breathing. Behind him, he heard the soft padding of Mrs. Darlene's slippers on the walkway. "Oh, honey," she said, her voice cracking. "I just saw Mr. Peterson putting that up." She reached for his arm, her weathered hand gentle but firm. "You and Gracie can stay with me. I've got that spare room just gathering dust." Eli turned to face his elderly neighbor, seeing the tears welling in her kind eyes. "I can't do that to you, Mrs. D. You've already done too much." "Nonsense," she insisted, dabbing at her eyes with the corner of her cardigan. "The Lord puts us in each other's paths for a reason." But Eli was already shaking his head. "The media would just follow us there. They'd be camped outside your door next. I won't bring that chaos into your life." Inside the apartment, Gracie was still sleeping, unaware of how their world was crumbling again. Eli's gaze fell on the small jewelry box on his dresser, the last thing of real value they owned. His wife's heart-shaped locket lay inside, the gold still gleaming despite the years. Sarah had worn it every day until the accident. With heavy steps, he retrieved the box and slipped it into his pocket. The weight of it felt like an anchor against his hip as he made his way to the local pawn shop. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. The owner, Mr. Martinez, looked up from his newspaper, recognition flickering across his face. "Mr. Turner," he said quietly, setting aside his reading. Eli placed the locket on the counter, unable to meet the other man's eyes. "How much?" Mr. Martinez picked up the necklace carefully, examining the delicate engravings. "This is fine gold." "Sarah's?" Eli nodded, his throat too tight for words. "I can give you 300, Mr. Martinez said softly. "That's more than market value, but—" He trailed off, both men knowing it was an act of kindness. The money felt dirty in Eli's pocket as he bought groceries, enough to last them a few days. He'd barely finished putting them away when there was another knock at the door. This time, it was Lena, her usual camera absent, her face drawn with worry. "I saw the eviction notice," she said without preamble. "Eli, I'm so sorry. This is all my fault. If I hadn't—" "Stop!" Eli cut her off, his voice firm but not unkind. "You tried to help. Sometimes help hurts worse than leaving things alone. But you meant well." Lena stepped inside, looking around at the half-packed boxes they'd scrounged from behind the grocery store. "I'm not giving up," she declared. "I'll find proof about your service record. I'll make this right." Eli continued packing, carefully wrapping Gracie's few toys in newspaper. Sometimes right and wrong don't matter much to people who've already made up their minds. "Where will you go?" Lena asked, picking up a crayon drawing of their family. "Just stick figures of Eli and Gracie, holding hands under a yellow sundae, church shelter on Oak Street," Eli replied, his voice steady despite the shame burning in his chest. "They've got space for us." Lena reached for her phone. "Let me pay for a hotel, at least for a few." "No." Eli's tone left no room for argument. "We've had enough charity to last a lifetime. Sometimes a man needs to hit bottom before he can stand up straight again." They loaded the truck in silence, their life fitting into just a few boxes and bags. Gracie helped, treating it like an adventure, unaware of the gravity weighing down the adults around her. Mrs. Darlene stood in her doorway, crying quietly and holding a bag of sandwiches she'd made for them. The church shelter was a plain brick building with a small cross above the door. Inside, the air smelled of industrial cleaner and old coffee. A kind-faced volunteer showed them to their spot, 2 narrow cots in a room shared with 3 other families. Gracie bounced on her cot, testing its springs. "Look, Daddy, it's like camping." Eli managed a weak smile, setting their bags down. The other families gave them space, recognizing the raw look of people on their first night of homelessness. A mother with 2 small children offered Gracie a spare coloring book, which she accepted with shy thanks. As night fell, the shelter grew quiet except for the soft sounds of people trying to settle into unfamiliar beds. Eli tucked Gracie in, pulling the thin blanket up to her chin. She looked up at him with those trust-filled eyes that both broke and mended his heart. "It's okay, Daddy," she whispered, reaching up to touch his cheek. "I still like the stars." Eli nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He lay back on his own cot, staring at the water-stained ceiling tiles, his eyes burning with unshed tears. Through the high windows, he could see a patch of night sky, but no stars were visible through the shelter's security lights. The morning sun painted colored patterns across the church shelter's floor through the stained glass windows. Eli blinked awake, his back stiff from the thin cot. Next to him, Gracie hummed softly as she colored in a worn coloring book Mrs. Darlene had given her before they left. "Good morning, sweetheart," Eli whispered, watching her small hands carefully stay within the lines. She'd always been neat, just like her mother. "Morning, Daddy," she smiled, not looking up from her work. "I'm making something pretty for our new room." Eli's heart squeezed. The room was just a corner of the church shelter's dormitory, sectioned off with a curtain for privacy. But Gracie didn't seem to mind. She had that gift, finding beauty in the smallest things. "Mr. Turner?" a gentle voice called. Reverend Cole approached, his weathered face kind beneath salt and pepper hair. "I brought some coffee if you'd like." "Thank you, Reverend," Eli said, accepting the steaming cup. The warmth felt good in his hands. The pastor sat down on a nearby folding chair. "How did you sleep?" "Well enough," Eli replied, though the dark circles under his eyes told a different story. He glanced around the shelter's main room, noting the dripping faucet in the corner and the creaky stairs leading to the second floor. His hands itched to fix something, anything, to feel useful again. "I noticed your plumbing's giving you trouble," Eli said carefully, "and those stairs could use some work." I'm pretty good with repairs. Maybe I could help out while we're here?" Reverend Cole's eyes crinkled. "We'd be grateful for the help, but you don't need to earn your keep here, son. This is God's house. All are welcome." "I know," Eli said softly, "but I need to do something. I can't just—" His voice caught. "Can't just sit still while the world judges you?" Reverend Cole finished gently. Eli nodded, looking down at his coffee. The bitter liquid reflected his tired face. "Tell me about it," the pastor said, settling back in his chair. And somehow, in the quiet morning light with Gracie's soft humming in the background, Eli found himself talking. He told Reverend Cole about the viral video, the brief hope of redemption, the custody battle, and finally, the cruel rumors that had torn it all down. "I just don't understand," Eli said, his voice rough. "I served my country. I tried to be a good father. I never asked for attention or fame. And now," he gestured helplessly at their surroundings. Reverend Cole was quiet for a moment, watching Gracie color. "You know," he said finally, "I used to be a wealthy man, had a big house, fancy car, all of it. Then the market crashed, and I lost everything. My wife left. Friends disappeared. I was angry at God for years." He leaned forward, his eyes intent on Eli's face. "But sometimes, God lets you lose everything so you can learn what truly matters. I found my calling here, helping others who've hit bottom. And you know what? I'm happier now than I ever was with all that stuff." Eli absorbed this, watching his daughter. She was humming Amazing Grace now. She learned it in Sunday school before everything fell apart. "Let me show you that plumbing problem," Reverend Cole said, standing. "Maybe we can start there." For the next few hours, Eli lost himself in honest work. The leaky faucet needed a new washer and some pipe tape. He borrowed tools from the church maintenance closet, working methodically while other shelter residents went about their morning routine. Some stopped to watch him work. A few offered to help. Eli found himself teaching an eager teenager named Marcus how to use a pipe wrench properly. The boy's eyes lit up when the leak finally stopped. "Man, that's cool," Marcus said. "You're like a miracle worker or something." Eli smiled, his first real smile in days. "No miracles here, just patience and the right tools." He moved on to the stairs next, tightening loose boards and replacing a broken step. The work was soothing. Here were problems he could actually fix. Each turn of a screw, each solid hammer strike felt like a tiny piece of his dignity returning. Gracie brought him water occasionally, proud to be helping. "You're making it all better, Daddy," she said, and he saw her mother's smile in her face. What Eli didn't notice, as he worked on his knees fixing a particularly stubborn pipe, was Lena, standing quietly in the doorway. Her camera was up, recording his careful movements, the gentle way he explained things to Marcus, how he paused to kiss Gracie's forehead when she brought him water. "He's still giving when he has nothing left," she whispered to the camera, her voice thick with emotion. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the Veterans Affairs office parking lot as Lena pulled in, her camera bag slung over her shoulder. The building looked tired, weathered brick and faded flags that had seen better days. Just like Eli's hopes, she thought. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead as she approached the front desk. A clerk with graying hair and kind eyes looked up from her computer. Her name tag read, "Margaret." "I'm looking for service records for Eli Turner," Lena said, trying to keep her voice steady. "It's urgent." Margaret's fingers clicked across the keyboard. Minutes ticked by. Lena's heart sank as the clerk's brow furrowed. "I'm sorry, honey," Margaret said, adjusting her reading glasses. "We had a system migration years ago. Lots of records got jumbled or misplaced." "Eli Turner's file." She shook her head. "It's just not here." Lena's shoulders slumped. "There has to be something. Newspaper clippings? Incident reports? Anything?" Margaret thought for a moment. "Well, there was that big flood in 15, down in Miller's Creek. Army helped with evacuations." She pulled out an old newspaper clipping. Some soldiers from his unit were there, including. She squinted at the yellowed paper. Sergeant Alan Brooks. He retired nearby. Lena's heart quickened. "Do you have his address?" 20 minutes later, Lena's GPS guided her down winding country roads. The late afternoon sun filtered through autumn leaves as she followed the directions to a small house on the outskirts of Miller's Creek. The house sat alone, surrounded by tall grass and old oak trees. An American flag hung limp in the still air. Lena parked and walked up the gravel path, her shoes crunching with each step. She knocked. No answer. She tried again. Finally, the door creaked open. A tall man with weathered features stood there, leaning on a cane. His eyes were sharp despite his age. "Sergeant Brooks?" "Haven't been called that in years," he said gruffly. "What's this about?" "I'm looking for information about Eli Turner. He served with you during the Miller's Creek flood." The old soldier's face softened slightly. "Turner? Yeah, I remember him." He studied her face. "You're that YouTube woman, aren't you? The one who started all this mess?" Lena swallowed hard. "Yes, sir, and I'm trying to fix it." Brooks was quiet for a long moment. Then he stepped back. "Come on in. Got something to show you." Inside, the house was neat but sparse. Military photos lined the walls. Brooks disappeared into a back room and returned with a shoebox full of photographs. "Kept everything from those days," he said, lowering himself into an armchair. "That flood, it was something else. Water came up so fast people didn't have time to get out." He rifled through the photos until he found what he was looking for. "There," he said, handing her a slightly faded photograph. "That's your man." Lena's hands trembled as she held it. The image showed a younger Eli, waist-deep in murky water, carrying a small child to safety. His face was focused, determined, the same quiet strength she'd come to know. "We'd been out there for hours," Brooks continued, his voice distant with memory. "Most guys were exhausted, but Turner, he kept going back in. That picture? It was his 5th rescue that day. Little girl was trapped in a floating car with her mama." Lena fumbled for her camera, turning it on. "Sergeant Brooks, would you mind telling that story again, on camera?" He nodded slowly. "About time. Somebody told the truth about Turner." As the red recording light blinked, Brooks spoke with the clear conviction of a soldier remembering one of his own. He described Eli's courage, his quiet leadership, the way he put others before himself. "Man nearly drowned saving that girl," Brooks said, pointing to the photo. "Current was strong, but he wouldn't let go. That's the kind of soldier, the kind of man Eli Turner is." The sun was setting when Lena finally stood to leave. Brooks walked her to the door, the photograph and his testimony safely recorded. "Thank you," she said softly. "This means everything." "Just said it right," he replied. "Turner deserves that much." Back in her car, Lena held the photograph under the dome light. Eli's face looked back at her, younger but with the same quiet dignity she'd grown to admire. Her camera sat in the passenger seat, containing the proof that could restore his honor. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Thank you, God." The camera's light blinked once more, like a candle of hope in the gathering dusk. The morning sun streamed through the shelter's windows as Lena sat at her laptop, her eyes red from a sleepless night of editing. Empty coffee cups littered the desk around her. She had spent hours piecing together the truth, determined to make this right. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked upload on her newest video. The truth about Eli Turner, the man behind the viral clip, appeared on her channel, and she held her breath. The video opened with a simple black screen and white text. I made a mistake. This is the real story. Then came the footage, not the sensationalized clips that had made Eli famous, but raw, unedited moments captured during their time together. Eli fixing broken chairs at the shelter, teaching Gracie multiplication tables by candlelight, sharing his dinner with another homeless veteran. Lena's voice narrated softly over the images. The man you thought you knew? He's even better than that. The screen filled with the proof she'd gathered. The retired sergeant's emotional interview played next. Turner? Hell yes, I remember him. During the floods of 18, that man went back into rising waters 3 times to save a family. Didn't even want his name in the report. The faded photograph appeared. Eli in his uniform, carrying a small child through chest-deep water. His face was younger, but wore the same quiet determination she'd come to know. More evidence followed. His service records, finally located in a military archives database. News clippings from his hometown paper about the flood rescue, letters from his commanding officers praising his character. But it was the current footage that hit hardest. Eli at the shelter, still helping others despite having nothing himself. The camera caught him sharing his blanket with an elderly man, teaching a young boy how to tie his shoes, fixing a broken heater while Gracie handed him tools. This is the America I want to show you, Lena's voice continued. Not a man who needs our pity, but one who deserves our respect. I filmed him without permission that first night, thinking I was exposing a problem. Instead, I exposed my own prejudices. The real story isn't about a man eating from dumpsters. It's about a father who would sacrifice anything for his child, a veteran who still serves others, and a human being whose grace under fire should humble us all. The video ended with recent footage of Gracie drawing pictures for other shelter residents, while Eli worked on fixing a broken window. Her small voice carried clearly. My daddy fixes everything. Not just things that are broken. He fixes hearts too. Within hours, the video exploded across social media. The real Eli Turner began trending. News outlets that had questioned his character now scrambled to apologize. Local stations ran retractions. National morning shows picked up the story. The donations started pouring in again, but this time they came with messages of genuine remorse and respect. Veterans organizations stepped forward to verify his service record. His former commanding officer appeared on television to praise his character. At the shelter, Eli sat with Gracie on a worn couch, watching as the local news played Lena's video. Other shelter residents gathered around, some patting his shoulder, others wiping away tears. The diner owner who had fired him called, voice cracking with emotion, offering not just his old job back, but a promotion to manager. His landlord left 3 voicemails apologizing, begging him to return to his apartment. Gracie bounced on the couch cushion, her eyes shining as she watched her father's story unfold on the small TV screen. Other shelter residents gathered closer, drawn by her excitement and the familiar faces on the screen. Mrs. Darlene had brought over her special cornbread, and the smell wafted through the shelter's common room. She stood behind the couch, her hand resting gently on Eli's shoulder as they watched. The footage showed Eli in his army uniform, then cut to him working at the shelter. Gracie's drawings appeared on screen, her colorful depictions of their life together, full of hope despite their circumstances. Daddy, you're a hero again, Gracie shouted, jumping up and down. Her voice carried through the shelter's common room, making several people smile through their tears. Eli's eyes glistened as he watched the truth of his life unfold on screen. His military service, his dedication as a father, his quiet acts of kindness, all laid bare for the world to see. He pulled Gracie close, his voice soft but steady. No, baby girl, he whispered. We just told the truth. Reverend Cole stood in the doorway, nodding silently as he watched the father and daughter together. The morning light streaming through the stained glass windows cast gentle colors across their faces, like a quiet blessing from above. On the TV screen, Lena's final words echoed through the room. Sometimes the greatest acts of heroism aren't on battlefields or in dramatic rescues. Sometimes they're in a father's daily sacrifice, in quiet dignity, and in unwavering faith. This is Eli Turner's true story, and I'm honored to finally tell it right. The shelter residents gathered around Eli and Gracie erupted in applause. Some were crying, others smiling, all moved by the simple power of truth finally coming to light. Through it all, Eli just held his daughter close, their hearts beating together in the gentle morning light, as the world outside finally saw what had been there all along. Not just a story of redemption, but a testament to unwavering love, faith, and the quiet strength that comes from both. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across Main Street as Eli stood outside Ruby's diner, watching a steady stream of customers file in and out. His new name tag gleamed, Assistant Manager. The weight of the past weeks lifted from his shoulders like morning mist burning away. Inside his apartment, boxes of donations waited to be sorted, clothes, books, and supplies that caring strangers had sent. The sight still humbled him. Mrs. Darlene had helped organize everything, labeling boxes with her neat handwriting while humming old hymns. "Daddy, look!" Gracie called from her bedroom. "My drawers are full again." Her voice carried the pure joy only an 8-year-old could muster. The sound made his heart swell. The diner owner, Mr. Ruby himself, had shown up at the church shelter that morning, hat in hand. His weathered face had been creased with regret as he offered Eli not just his old job back, but a promotion. "We need good people," he'd said simply, "and you're the best I know." The town had turned out in force to help them move back in. Veterans from the shelter carried furniture. Church ladies brought casseroles. Even the landlord had apologized, offering a reduced rate for 3 months to make amends. A knock at the door pulled Eli from his thoughts. Lena stood there, arms full of shopping bags, her camera nowhere in sight. "Special delivery," she announced with a warm smile. "Miss Camera." Gracie rushed forward, wrapping her arms around Lena's waist. "Hey, sweetie," Lena laughed, setting down the bags to return the hug. "I brought you some new school clothes. Want to see?" Gracie's eyes lit up as she peered into the bags. "Pink," she squealed, pulling out a sparkly sweater. Eli started to protest. "Lena, you didn't have to." "I wanted to," she cut him off gently. "Besides, every princess needs a proper wardrobe." The apartment filled with the sound of tissue paper rustling and Gracie's delighted gasps as she discovered each new item. Eli watched from the kitchen doorway, his throat tight with emotion. Another knock announced Reverend Cole's arrival, his kind face breaking into a wide smile as he took in the scene. "Looks like I'm right on time for the fashion show," he chuckled. "Come in, Reverend," Eli welcomed him. "Supper's almost ready." The smell of baked chicken and fresh rolls filled the small apartment, real food, cooked in their own kitchen again. They gathered around the table, which Mrs. Darlene had covered with the checkered cloth she'd insisted on giving them. Gracie wore her new pink sweater, beaming as she set out paper napkins with careful precision. "Would you bless the food, Reverend?" Eli asked quietly. Reverend Cole nodded, bowing his head. "Lord, we thank you for this food, for bringing this family home, and for showing us that your grace flows through the hearts of your people. Bless this meal and this home. Amen." "Amen," they echoed. The meal was simple but felt like a feast. Gracie chatted excitedly about returning to school, showing off her new backpack. Lena shared stories about her latest community outreach projects, inspired by Eli's story. The Reverend's deep laugh rang out often, warming the room like sunshine. "You know," Reverend Cole said between bites, "sometimes God's greatest gifts come wrapped in our darkest moments." Eli nodded, remembering those nights behind the diner. "I just wish I'd trusted more," he admitted. "Faith isn't about never doubting," the Reverend replied. "It's about finding your way back to trust, even after the doubt." Lena grew quiet, absently stirring her food. "I lost my way for a long time," she confessed. "But watching your faith, Eli, even when everything fell apart." She trailed off, blinking back tears. Gracie reached over and patted Lena's hand. "Daddy says God sends angels sometimes. Maybe you're ours." The adults laughed softly, but there was truth in the child's words that touched them all. As the evening wound down, Gracie proudly showed off her new clothes, twirling in each outfit while Lena recorded it on her phone, not for content, just for memories. The little girl's laughter echoed through the apartment like music. Mrs. Darlene stopped by with a homemade pie, and soon the small living room was filled with the warm chatter of friends who had become family. They shared stories, remembered darker days, and celebrated the light that had broken through. When it was time to leave, Reverend Cole hugged them all, whispering a final blessing over Gracie as she yawned. Mrs. Darlene fussed over leaving enough leftovers. Lena lingered, helping to clean up despite Eli's protests. Finally, the apartment grew quiet. Eli tucked Gracie into bed, her new clothes laid out carefully for school tomorrow. "I love you, Daddy," she murmured sleepily. "I love you too, baby girl," he whispered, kissing her forehead. After everyone had gone, Eli stepped out onto the small porch. The night air was cool and clear, stars twinkling overhead like distant promises kept. The same stars that had watched over him behind the diner now witnessed his restoration. He leaned against the railing, overwhelmed by the journey that had brought him here. The shame of those desperate nights, the viral video that exposed his struggles, the custody battle, the false accusations, and through it all, a thread of grace that had never truly broken. Looking up at the vast expanse of stars, Eli felt tears well up in his eyes. "You never left me, did you?" he whispered. The diner glowed with warmth on a crisp autumn evening. Its windows steamed up from the crowd inside. Rubies had been transformed for the night. White tablecloths covered the usual chrome tables. Fairy lights twinkled across the ceiling like captured stars, and a small stage stood where the jukebox usually Saturday. The place buzzed with energy as people in their Sunday best mingled, holding paper plates of comfort, food, and sharing stories that connected hearts across different walks of life. The transformation was remarkable. Where truckers usually sat hunched over coffee and pie, well-dressed families from Nashville now laughed with local factory workers. The checkered linoleum floor that had seen countless spilled meals and hurried conversations now hosted an elegant gathering that somehow felt both fancy and homey at the same time. Mrs. Ruby herself had insisted on keeping the handwritten menu board up, even though tonight's meal was free to all who came. Eli Turner adjusted his tie nervously behind the kitchen door, his reflection catching in the stainless steel surface of the industrial refrigerator. He wasn't used to wearing one, and it felt like it was choking him with every breath. His fingers trembled slightly as he straightened the borrowed sport coat that Reverend Cole had insisted he wear for the occasion. The jacket was a little too big in the shoulders, but it was clean and pressed, and that was what mattered. The smell of fried chicken and cornbread drifted through the kitchen, mixing with his nervous energy. Through the serving window, he could see volunteers bustling around with platters of food, their faces bright with purpose. It was hard to believe that just months ago, he'd been searching through the dumpster behind this very building for scraps to feed his daughter. "Daddy, you look handsome." Gracie beamed up at him, resplendent in her new blue dress that matched her eyes perfectly. Her hair was pulled back with the sparkly clip Lena had given her months ago, the same clip she'd worn to court the day they'd finally won their case. The dress swished when she moved, and she kept smoothing it down with her small hands, clearly delighted with how grown-up she felt. "Thanks, princess." Eli smiled, kneeling to her level so they were eye to eye. "You look prettier than a spring morning after the rain." "Are you scared?" Gracie asked, touching his cheek with her small hand. Her fingers were warm and steady, anchoring him in the moment. "Mrs. Darlene says it's okay to be scared sometimes. She says being scared just means something's important to you. Just a little nervous about talking to all those people," Eli admitted softly, his voice barely above a whisper. The crowd beyond the kitchen door seemed to grow louder with each passing minute, and he could feel the weight of their expectations settling on his shoulders like a heavy coat. "You can pretend they're all fireflies," Gracie suggested seriously, her face scrunched up in concentration. "That's what I do when I have to read in class. I pretend everyone's just little lights that want to hear my story." Eli chuckled, pulling her into a quick hug that smelled of her strawberry shampoo and the faint scent of crayons that always seemed to cling to her clothes. The simple wisdom of children never ceased to amaze him. Somehow, his 8-year-old daughter could find magic in the most ordinary moments and peace in the most frightening one. "5 minutes, Eli," Lena called, poking her head through the swinging kitchen door. She was dressed in a simple black dress that made her look both professional and approachable, her camera hanging from her neck as always. But tonight, it seemed less like a barrier and more like a bridge, a way to connect hearts rather than just capture moments for content. Her hair was pulled back in a neat bun, and for once, she wasn't checking her phone or adjusting camera settings. Tonight, she was fully present. The diner had filled beyond capacity, with people standing along the walls and crowding near the windows. Local families who'd supported Eli through everything sat shoulder to shoulder with well-dressed donors from Nashville who'd driven down just for this evening. Mrs. Darlene had baked enough pies to feed an army, apple, pecan, and her famous chocolate cream, and they were arranged on a long table near the entrance, like edible welcome signs. The diner staff had volunteered their evening to serve, wearing their best aprons and biggest smiles. Even Eli's lawyer, Mr. Hargrove, stood near the back, beaming proudly and occasionally wiping his eyes with his handkerchief. The air thrummed with anticipation and love. Conversations rose and fell like gentle waves, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of coffee cups. Someone had strung white lights from corner to corner, creating a canopy of stars above the crowd. It felt like a wedding or a homecoming, not just a charity launch. Lena took the stage first, her voice clear and strong as it carried over the crowd. 6 months ago, I thought I was filming a story about poverty in America. I was hunting for content, looking for something that would go viral and boost my subscriber count. She paused, her honesty cutting through the room like a gentle knife. Instead, I captured something far more precious, a father's love, a community's heart, and the kind of faith that survives even when hope seems lost. She looked directly at Eli through the kitchen doorway, her eyes bright with unshed tears. The Gracie Project isn't just another charity. It's not about tax write-offs or feeling good about ourselves for a few minutes. It's a promise to see the dignity in every person, to lift up those who've fallen, and to remember that grace isn't earned. It's given freely, like rain on dry ground. The crowd applauded warmly, the sound rolling through the diner like thunder. Eli felt his heart hammering against his ribs as Lena gestured for him to come up. His mouth went dry, and for a moment he wondered if he could actually do this. Gracie gave him a little push, her hands surprisingly strong against his back, whispering, "Remember the fireflies, Daddy. They're all just waiting to hear your light." His work boots felt heavy on the makeshift stage, each step echoing in his ears louder than it should have. The lights were bright, but he could still make out familiar faces scattered throughout the crowd. Reverend Cole nodding encouragingly from the third row. The diner owner wiping her eyes with her flour-dusted apron. Mrs. Darlene clutching her hands together in what was clearly a fervent prayer. Veterans he'd met at the shelter stood at attention near the back, their faces reflecting his journey in their own weathered features. Eli cleared his throat, his voice rough with emotion and nerves. "I never wanted to be famous, never wanted to be anyone's inspiration or poster child for anything." He looked down at his hands, strong hands that had once scrounged for food behind this very building, hands that had held his daughter while she cried from hunger, hands that had learned to accept help when pride wanted to refuse it. But God has a way of using our lowest moments to lift others up. He takes our garbage and turns it into gold. The room grew still, hanging on his every word. Even the usual clinking of coffee cups ceased, and the only sound was the gentle hum of the fluorescent lights overhead and the distant rumble of traffic on the highway. "Sometimes you eat from trash before you realize your worth was never garbage," Eli continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. The truth of it resonated in his chest, filling him with a warmth that spread outward like ripples on a pond. "I learned that dignity isn't in what you have or where you eat or what kind of car you drive. It's in how you love, how you persist when everything's falling apart, and how you let others help when pride wants to stand in the way like a stubborn mule." His eyes found Gracie in the crowd, her face shining with pride and love. "My daughter taught me that grace comes in small packages and big hearts, that sometimes the people who have the least give the most. And that faith isn't about having all the answers. It's about trusting that there's love enough to go around, even when you can't see where it's coming from." The crowd rose slowly, applause building like thunder rolling across the Tennessee hills. Tears flowed freely, but they were tears of recognition, of seeing themselves in his struggle, his faith, his humanity. People who had never known hunger found themselves understanding its weight. Those who had always had enough saw the courage it took to keep going when you didn't. Lena filmed from the side, her own cheeks wet with tears she didn't bother to hide, but her smile was radiant with pride and something deeper, the joy of witnessing grace made visible. She caught Gracie bouncing on her toes, clapping wildest of all for her daddy, her blue dress swirling around her like captured sky. After the speech, people lined up to shake Eli's hand, make donations, and share their own stories of hardship and hope that had been awakened by his words. Veterans spoke of similar struggles, their voices thick with understanding and brotherhood. Single parents hugged him with the fierce recognition of shared battles. Business owners pressed business cards into his hand, offering job opportunities for future project participants. Children shyly approached with drawings they'd made, adding them to a growing collection that would soon cover one entire wall of the project's new office. The evening wound down slowly, like a sunset unwilling to fade into darkness. Volunteers cleared plates, while last-minute donations were counted and recorded. The final tally would exceed everyone's wildest expectations. But more than money had been raised tonight, community had been built, hope had been shared, and love had multiplied like loaves and fishes. Gracie had fallen asleep in Mrs. Darlene's lap, her new dress slightly wrinkled but her face peaceful and content. Her small hand clutched a paper napkin on which someone had written, Thank you for sharing your daddy with us." And even in sleep, she smiled. As the final guest departed into the cool, autumn night, calling out last goodbyes and promises to stay in touch, Eli and Lena found themselves sitting on the diner's front steps. The autumn air had grown cooler, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from distant chimneys, along with the sweet possibility of new beginnings. The neon sign above them hummed softly, casting a gentle red glow over them both, painting their faces in warm light. "You know," Lena said softly, her camera finally still in her lap for the first time all evening, "I spent years chasing stories, thinking I was changing the world through my lens, always looking for the next viral moment, the next subscriber milestone." She looked at her hands, noting how different they looked when they weren't constantly moving to adjust settings or check metrics. But I'd lost sight of what really mattered. Lost my faith somewhere between viral videos and social media analytics, buried it under algorithms and engagement rates. Eli listened quietly, understanding the weight of her confession. He'd learned that sometimes the most important conversations happened in the spaces between words, in the silence that let truth settle like snow. "But watching you," she continued, her voice thick with emotion and wonder, "watching how you held onto your faith even when everything was taken away, even when the whole world seemed to turn against you. It showed me what real faith looks like. Not the kind that only works when life is easy, but the kind that burns steady even in the darkest storm." She took a shaky breath, and when she spoke again, her words came out like a prayer. "I found it again, Eli. Not just belief, but real faith. The kind that moves mountains and feeds hungry children and makes trash into treasure. The kind that sees the sacred in the ordinary and finds God in diner food and second chances." Eli reached over and took her hand, his calloused fingers wrapping gently around hers with the careful tenderness of someone who understood how precious and fragile hope could be. No words were needed in that moment. The simple touch said everything about journey and arrival, about loss and finding, about the kind of love that grows quietly in the spaces between one person's need and another's willingness to help. Above them, the diner's neon sign continued its steady hum, a quiet witness to grace made visible, to miracles that happen not with trumpet fanfare, but with the gentle persistence of people choosing to see the light in each other, one meal, one moment, one act of kindness at a time. The morning sun painted Ruby's diner in warm golden light as Eli wiped down the counter, humming softly to himself. The familiar rhythm of clinking dishes and coffee brewing filled the air. Through the window, he could see the under new management sign still hanging proudly, though it had been weeks since his promotion. "Order up," he called, sliding a plate of steaming pancakes across the counter to Mrs. Darlene, who had become a regular morning customer. My, she said, beaming at him. "Look at you now, running this place like you were born to it." Eli ducked his head, still not quite used to compliments. "Just doing my best, ma'am." The diner buzzed with the comfortable chatter of regulars. Some were reading the local paper, which featured a small article about the Gracie Project's latest success, helping 3 veteran families find housing last month. The foundation's work had started small but was growing steadily, spreading hope like ripples in a pond. At home, mornings had taken on a sweet routine. Gracie would bounce out of bed, her backpack ready, artwork always in hand. This morning, she'd drawn their little family stick figures of herself, Eli, and now often including Lena, whom she'd started calling Miss Camera since that first day. "Daddy," Gracie had asked over breakfast, "is Miss Camera going to stay forever now?" The question had made Eli's heart skip a beat. He'd carefully stirred his coffee, buying time. "Well, sweetheart, she's moving closer to help with the foundation. That's all we know for sure." But there was more to it, and Eli knew it. Over these weeks, Lena had become as much a part of their lives as the sunrise. She'd traded her flashy vlogs for quiet acts of kindness, filming anonymous good deeds that showed people's better nature. No more viral sensations, just genuine moments of grace. The bell above the diner door chimed, pulling Eli from his thoughts. Lena walked in, her camera bag slung over her shoulder, but closed a sight that still surprised him. She'd been carrying it less and less lately. "Morning, stranger," she said, sliding onto a stool at the counter. "The usual?" Eli asked, already reaching for a clean mug. "You know me too well." She smiled, that warm smile that had become as familiar as his own reflection. As he poured her coffee, Lena pulled out some papers from her bag. "So, I've been thinking about the foundation," she began, then paused, seeming nervous, something he rarely saw in her anymore. "I found a small office space, here in town." Eli set the coffee pot down, studying her face. "Here? But your whole life is in Nashville. Was in Nashville? She corrected gently. The foundation needs someone here full-time and, she traced the rim of her mug with her finger, I've never felt more purpose anywhere else. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Eli felt his cheeks warm, and he busied himself with wiping an already clean spot on the counter. That's good news, he managed finally, his voice soft. Gracie will be thrilled. Just Gracie? Lena asked, her eyes twinkling. Before Eli could respond, the kitchen door swung open. His new cook, Tony, a veteran he'd hired through the foundation, called out, "Boss, we got that delivery coming in 10. Saved by the bell, Lena teased, but her eyes were kind. Throughout the morning rush, they fell into an easy rhythm. Lena set up her laptop at the corner table, working on foundation paperwork. Eli moved between tables, greeting customers, many of whom he now knew by name. The diner hummed with life and second chances. During a quiet moment, Eli brought Lena a fresh coffee and leaned against the table. "You know," he said quietly, "a year ago, I was around back of this place, thinking God had forgotten all about me." Lena looked up, her eyes soft with understanding. "And now? Now I know he was just getting started." Eli glanced around the diner at the donation jar for the foundation, at the wall of community photos, at the spot where he'd first seen that red camera light in the darkness. Guess he's still full of surprises. A blush crept up his neck as he said it, realizing how the words might sound. But before either could say more, the door burst open and Gracie ran in, fresh from the school bus, her backpack bouncing. "Daddy, Miss Camera," she called out, clutching something in each hand. "I got ice cream from the truck." She held up 2 slightly melting ice cream bars, chocolate already dripping down her fingers. "Gracie Turner," Eli started, trying to sound stern but failing completely. "You know we have rules about, but it's so hot today," she protested, holding out the drippy treats. "And I used my allowance, one for you and one for Miss Camera." Lena burst out laughing at the sight of Gracie's proud, chocolate-smeared face. "Well, we can't let good ice cream go to waste, can we, Mr. Manager?" Eli looked at his daughter's hopeful expression, at Lena's laughing eyes, at the melting mess that was surely going to drip all over his clean floor, and felt his heart swell with a joy so pure it almost hurt. "I guess not," he conceded. Accepting the sticky treat, they sat there together, all 3 of them, sharing their melting ice cream and laughing at the mess, while the afternoon sun streamed through the diner windows and turned everything to gold. The evening sun painted long shadows across the back alley of Ruby's diner, casting a golden glow on the weathered brick walls that had witnessed so much heartbreak and hope. Eli Turner stood there in the lengthening twilight, his calloused hands wrapped around a heavy black trash bag, the weight familiar but carrying an entirely different meaning now. 6 months ago, he'd been here in this very spot, desperately searching through these same steel bins for forgotten leftovers to feed his hungry daughter. Now, as the diner's assistant manager, he was responsible for keeping them spotless and organized, a responsibility he took seriously. He paused in his work, letting the bag rest against his worn jeans as he looked around the transformed space. The metal dumpster gleamed in the fading amber light, recently painted a cheerful sky blue at his own suggestion. Ruby had laughed when he'd proposed the color change, saying nobody ever worried about making trash bins pretty. But she'd agreed anyway. The alley itself was dramatically cleaner too, something he'd made his personal mission. No more scattered newspapers dancing in the wind. No more forgotten food containers growing mold in forgotten corners. No more broken glass threatening bare feet or paws. Even the cracked concrete had been pressure washed until it sparkled, erasing years of accumulated stains, grease spots, and the general neglect that had made this place feel so hopeless. The brick walls themselves told a story of renewal. Where graffiti had once marked territory and despair, someone had painted a simple mural of wildflowers growing through concrete cracks. Eli suspected it was one of the local high school kids whose families had been helped by the foundation, though no one had claimed credit for the beautiful work. "Some view, huh?" Lena's voice carried from the alley entrance, warm and familiar as honey on fresh biscuits. She stood there silhouetted against the diner's back porch light, her professional camera equipment slung over her shoulder, but the red recording light wasn't blinking yet. Her dark hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail that had escaped its elastic in several places, and she wore one of the diner's new branded t-shirts, soft blue cotton with Ruby's Family Diner, embroidered in cheerful yellow thread. The uniform design had been her idea, wanting the staff to feel proud of where they worked. Eli smiled, though his weathered face held traces of remembered pain etched in the lines around his eyes. The memories of that desperate night would never fully fade. And maybe they shouldn't. Different from the last time you filmed me here, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of those intervening months. That's kind of the point. Lena walked closer, her sneakers making soft sounds against the clean concrete. The evening air carried the mingled scents of fried chicken from the kitchen, honeysuckle from the vacant lot next door, and the lingering warmth of summer pavement. You ready to do this? We can wait if you need more time. He nodded slowly, lifting the trash bag and setting it carefully inside the pristine dumpster. Even this simple action felt ceremonial somehow. Just let me wash up first. Want to look presentable for your audience? Lena smiled at that. Eli Turner, you could be covered in mud and still have more dignity than most people in three-piece suits. Inside the diner's back door, Eli could hear the comfortable sounds of the evening crowd beginning to gather, the friendly chatter of regular customers greeting each other by name, the cheerful clink of thick ceramic plates being set on worn Formica tables, and the steady sizzle of burgers and chicken on the well-seasoned grill. These sounds had once tormented him during those desperate nights when he was hungry and desperate, standing in this very alley while warm food and laughter mocked him from just beyond his reach. Now they were the comforting soundtrack of his redemption, proof that life could change in ways he'd never dared to dream. Through the screen door, he caught a glimpse of Gracie at the counter, her small legs swinging from a tall stool as she carefully folded paper napkins with Mrs. Darlene. His daughter's bright laugh rang out as the elderly woman told her another of her endless supply of gentle stories, and Eli's heart swelled with gratitude so profound it almost took his breath away. After washing his hands thoroughly in the small utility sink, scrubbing under his nails and rolling down his sleeves, Eli stepped back into the alley. The temperature had dropped just enough to be comfortable, and somewhere in the distance, a church bell chimed 7 o'clock. Lena had set up her camera on a small black tripod, positioning it at exactly the right angle to catch both him and the infamous dumpster in the frame. The familiar red recording light blinked steadily, but she'd insisted on keeping things simple. No fancy studio lighting, no carefully staged scenes or scripted words, just truth, as raw and real as that first night when she'd accidentally captured his lowest moment. Remember, she said softly, adjusting the camera's focus with practiced hands, just be yourself. Be honest. That's what touched people's hearts in the first place, and it's what they need to hear again. Eli straightened his collar, the same style of work shirt he'd worn that desperate night 6 months ago. But now it was crisp and clean, with "Assistant Manager" embroidered in neat blue thread above the pocket, where his name tag used to hang crooked. The shirt fit better now, too. Regular meals had filled out his too thin frame, and regular sleep had erased the hollow shadows under his eyes. Hard to believe it's only been half a year, he murmured, running his hand through hair that was now properly cut instead of raggedly trimmed with kitchen scissors. Rolling? Lena announced quietly, giving him an encouraging nod. The camera's soft electronic hum was the only sound for a moment as Eli gathered his thoughts. Eli took a deep breath, the evening air filling his lungs as he looked around the transformed alley, with wonder still fresh in his eyes. The camera caught his genuine emotion as he reached out and traced his fingers along the dumpster's smooth blue edge, the metal still warm from the day's Sunday. 6 months ago, I stood right here in this exact spot, he began, his voice steady but thick with the weight of memory. I was a father who couldn't feed his daughter, a veteran who'd lost his way completely, a man who honestly thought God had forgotten him entirely. He gestured toward the dumpster with a mixture of shame and gratitude. I was searching through trash, digging through other people's leftovers, trying to find enough edible food to keep my little girl from going hungry another night. The desperation of it, the absolute humiliation. His voice caught slightly. I felt like nothing less than nothing, like I'd failed at the most basic thing a father is supposed to do. The memory was still sharp enough to make his hands tremble slightly. The shame of it ate at me worse than the actual hunger. Every night I came here, I died a little more inside, wondering how I'd sunk so low. A warm breeze rustled through the alley, carrying the mouth-watering scent of fresh-baked chocolate chip cookies from the diner's kitchen, Mrs. Ruby's famous recipe that now drew customers from 3 counties over. Eli smiled slightly at the irony. I didn't know it then, but God was about to use this exact spot, this dumpster, this moment of complete and utter humiliation to teach me the most important lesson of my life about grace. He walked a few steps, pointing to the shadowy area near the alley entrance where Lena had stood that fateful night. A woman with a camera stood right there, hidden in the darkness. I didn't know her then, didn't know her name or what she did for a living. Had no idea she was about to change my entire life forever. He glanced at Lena behind the camera, their eyes meeting briefly in a moment of shared understanding and affection. When I found out I'd been filmed, I thought that video would destroy what little dignity I had left. Instead, it opened a door I never could have imagined in my wildest dreams. The evening light continued to soften and deepen, creating a gentle golden halo effect around his still lean frame as he continued speaking from his heart. People ask me all the time if I'm angry about being filmed at my absolute lowest moment. If I resent having my shame broadcast to millions of strangers. The truth is, I was furious at first. Felt violated and exposed and humiliated all over again. He shook his head slowly, a peaceful smile spreading across his weathered features. But now I understand that sometimes our deepest shame becomes our greatest testimony. Sometimes God uses our rock bottom as the foundation for something beautiful. Eli walked slowly to the diner's back door, touching the painted metal handle thoughtfully. Through the screen, warm yellow light spilled out, along with the sounds of contentment and community. Today, I manage the very place where I once scrounged for scraps like a stray dog. The Gracie Project, named after my daughter, has helped hundreds of families just like mine avoid the desperation I felt. My little girl doesn't go to bed hungry anymore, doesn't have to see her daddy cry from shame and helplessness. His voice caught with emotion. And that woman with the camera, she taught me that even when we think we're completely alone in the darkness, God is orchestrating something beautiful behind the scenes. The diner's vintage neon sign hummed to life above them with a familiar electric buzz, bathing the entire alley in a warm red glow that made everything look magical and hopeful. Through the kitchen window, they could see Gracie's silhouette as she helped Mrs. Darlene fold napkins, their nightly routine that had become as sacred as any prayer. The little girl's bright laughter drifted out on the evening air like music. But you know what the real miracle is? Eli turned back to face the camera fully, his eyes bright with unshed tears of gratitude. It's not the job, though I'm grateful for it every single day. It's not the foundation or all the families we've helped, though that work fills my soul. It's not even having food on our table and a roof over our heads, though those blessings mean everything. He paused, swallowing hard as emotion threatened to overwhelm him. The real miracle is that God used my deepest shame, my most humiliating moment, to show other desperate people that they're not alone in their darkness. That's what grace looks like in action, taking our trash and turning it into treasure. The last rays of sunlight painted the sky in brilliant streaks of orange, pink, and purple, creating a breathtaking backdrop to this sacred space of transformation. Eli stood straighter, his shoulders squared with quiet confidence, and his voice growing strong and clear. If you're hungry tonight, whether it's for food, for love, for hope, for purpose, please don't give up. There's still good in this world, still people who care, still a God who sees you even in your darkest hour. He smiled then, the expression transforming his entire face with joy and peace. Your dumpster moment might just be your doorway to grace. The camera held on his radiant smile as the first stars began to appear in the deepening sky above. The evening sun painted Ruby's diner in warm golden light, casting long shadows across the busy parking lot. The familiar neon sign hummed softly overhead, its red glow mixing with the amber sunset that stretched across the Tennessee sky. Inside, the buzz of conversation and clinking plates filled the air with a comfortable harmony that spoke of community and belonging. The diner had transformed over the past 6 months, not just in appearance but in spirit. What had once been simply a place to grab a quick meal had become something far more precious. A large framed photograph dominated the wall near the entrance, catching the sunset's glow through the front windows. In it, Eli Turner stood with his arm around Gracie, while Lena smiled beside them, her hand resting gently on Gracie's shoulder. The words, "Faith fed us," were written in Gracie's crooked but heartfelt handwriting beneath the image, the purple crayon letters slightly smudged but radiating pure love. The photo had become something of a local landmark. People often stopped to take pictures with it, sharing their own stories of hope and recovery on social media, with hashtags like #FaithFedUse and #GracieProject. The dining room itself bore witness to the changes. Where generic corporate artwork once hung, colorful drawings now covered the walls, pictures of rainbows, stick figure families, and houses with crooked chimneys, all drawn by children whose families had been touched by the foundation's work. Each piece of art told a story of renewal, of second chances, of dreams rebuilt from the ground up. Gracie, wearing a child-sized Ruby's Diner apron that Mrs. Darlene had specially sewn for her, moved carefully between tables with a tray of water glasses. Her tongue poked out slightly in concentration as she navigated around chairs and customers, determined not to spill a single drop. Her face lit up each time she served someone, especially the veterans who came for their weekly free meal program every Thursday evening. She had grown taller over the months, more confident in her movements, but she'd kept that pure-hearted sweetness that touched everyone she met. "Here you go, Mr. Johnson," Gracie beamed, setting down a glass for an elderly veteran in a wheelchair. The man's weathered hand shook slightly as he reached for the water, but his smile was steady and warm. "Daddy says you were in the same place he was, the desert, with all the sand and the really hot Sunday." The old veteran chuckled, his weathered face crinkling with joy as he looked down at the little girl who had become like a granddaughter to half the town. "That's right, sweetheart. Your daddy and I have walked some of the same roads, some dusty ones, some rocky ones, but we made it home, didn't we?" Gracie nodded solemnly, then brightened again. "And now you get to eat here every week. Mrs. Ruby makes the best pie, even better than Mrs. Darlene's. But don't tell her I said that." Mr. Johnson winked conspiratorially. "Your secret's safe with me, little one." Eli watched from behind the counter, his heart swelling with pride and gratitude. He wore a crisp white shirt now, with assistant manager, stitched above the pocket in neat blue thread. The title meant less to him than what it represented: stability, dignity, and the chance to give back to a community that had lifted him up when he'd fallen. His hands, still rough and calloused from years of manual labor, now spent more time shaking others' hands in greeting than doing heavy lifting, though he wasn't afraid of hard work when it was needed. The evening rush was picking up, but it felt different now. Families filled booths that had once sat empty during slow periods, the sound of children's laughter mixed with adult conversation, creating a symphony of life that Ruby herself would have loved. Eli had heard stories about the original Ruby from longtime customers, how she'd fed anyone who was hungry, how she'd listened to troubles and offered advice along with coffee refills. He felt her spirit still lingering in the warm walls of the place that bore her name. Lena moved through the diner with her camera, capturing moments for their foundation's documentary series. She'd learned to film differently now, not hunting for tragedy or viral moments, but celebrating triumph and quiet dignity. Her equipment was smaller these days, less intrusive, allowing her to blend into scenes rather than dominate them. She paused near the kitchen, focusing on an interaction between Gracie and a young mother with two small children who had just walked in, uncertainty written across their faces. The woman held her children close, her clothes clean but worn, her eyes darting around the restaurant as if trying to calculate prices before sitting down. The little boy, maybe 5 years old, pressed against his mother's side while his baby sister fussed in her arm. "Are you hungry?" Gracie asked the little boy directly, her voice gentle but matter-of-fact. When he nodded shyly, his thumb creeping toward his mouth, she turned to his mother with the serious expression she wore when helping people. "It's okay, we have plenty. Daddy says no one should ever be ashamed to say they're hungry. He says being hungry just means you're human." The mother's eyes welled up as Gracie scampered off to get them menus, her small feet pattering across the worn linoleum with purpose. Eli stepped out from behind the counter, wiping his hands on his apron as he approached their table with gentle authority. He'd learned to read the signs, the way someone held themselves when pride warred with need, the careful way they studied a menu, the quiet desperation hidden behind polite smiles. "Welcome to Ruby's," he said softly, his voice carrying the warmth that had made him beloved by customers and strangers alike. "Everything's on the house tonight. We're celebrating my little girl there just got an A on her spelling test, and we like to share good news." The woman started to protest, her face flushing with embarrassment. "Oh, we couldn't, we can pay for—" But Eli raised his hand with a kind smile, the same gesture he learned from Mrs. Darlene, the one that said, "Let me love you without making it feel like charity. We have a saying here, grace isn't earned, it's given. Please, let us serve you. It would be our honor." Mrs. Darlene, who now had her own special table near the window where she could keep an eye on everything, dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. At 73, she'd seen enough heartbreak and enough healing to recognize both when they appeared. "Lord, look how you work," she whispered, watching the scene unfold. "Look how you take the broken pieces and make something beautiful." The diner had become more than a restaurant. It was a gathering place, a sanctuary of sorts where people came not just for food but for fellowship, for the feeling that they belonged somewhere. The walls, once bare except for generic decorations, now displayed children's artwork, mostly Gracie's, but also drawings from other kids who'd been helped by the Gracie Project. Each picture told a story of renewal, of families pulled back from the brink, of children who'd learned that tomorrow could be brighter than today. Reverend Cole sat in his usual booth near the back, sharing coffee and quiet conversation with some shelter residents. The shelter itself had been renovated thanks to foundation funds, new beds, a proper kitchen, a children's play area, but he still came to the diner several times a week. He said it reminded him that miracles didn't always need stained glass windows to shine through, that sometimes God worked through formica tables and vinyl booths just as powerfully as through cathedral altars. As the evening wore on, the sunset's golden light deepened to amber, then slowly faded to purple. The parking lot began to fill with the dinner crowd, families finishing up at the Little League fields, couples on date nights, elderly folks who came for the early bird special and stayed for the company. Eli stepped outside for a moment, breathing in the cooling air that carried the scent of honeysuckle from the hedges behind the building. The neon sign hummed above him, casting its familiar red glow across the pavement. He remembered standing in this very spot 6 months ago, trembling with uncertainty about the future, shame burning in his chest as he'd tried to find enough courage to ask for work. The same sign had been there then, but everything else had changed. Most importantly, the man standing beneath it. Gracie followed him out, her small hand slipping into his with the natural ease of a child who had never doubted her father's love, even in their darkest times. She looked up at the sign, then at her father, studying his face in the red light. Her eyes held wisdom beyond her years, the kind that came from watching courage in action, from seeing grace triumph over shame. "Daddy," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the distant sound of traffic on the main road. "Remember when we used to be scared to eat?" Eli knelt beside her, their shadows merging on the pavement. The question squeezed his heart, but not with pain, with gratitude so profound it almost overwhelmed him. So much had changed. The diner's lights spilled out behind them, warm and welcoming, painting golden rectangles on the asphalt, so different from those cold nights when he'd hidden in these same shadows, desperate and ashamed. "I remember, baby girl," he answered honestly, his voice steady but soft. They never hid the truth from each other. Not anymore. Honesty had become another form of grace in their lives, the gift of not having to pretend things were better or worse than they actually were. Gracie's face grew thoughtful, her brow furrowing slightly the way it did when she was working through something important. She looked at the people inside, visible through the large windows, at the families eating together, at the veterans sharing stories over coffee, at Lena, capturing it all on camera with the reverence of someone who'd learned to see the sacred in the ordinary. Then she turned back to her father, her eyes bright with understanding that seemed to illuminate the growing darkness around them. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice carrying the pure clarity of childhood, the kind of truth that cuts through complexity and reaches straight to the heart. "We don't have to look for food anymore." Eli smiled, feeling tears gather in his eyes as the simple truth in her words struck deep, not just about food, but about all the ways they'd been fed, by love, by community, by faith, by the kindness of strangers who'd become family. He looked at his daughter, this precious soul who had never lost hope, even in their darkest times, who had taught him as much about grace as any sermon or scripture ever could. "No, baby girl," he replied, his voice thick with emotion as he pulled her into a hug that smelled of French fries and little girl shampoo. "Now we look for hearts to feed." Behind them, the diner's warm lights glowed like a beacon in the gathering dusk, drawing people in from the darkness with the promise of more than just a meal. The same stars that had witnessed their struggles now watched over their redemption, their healing, their growth into something larger than they'd ever imagined possible. And in the red glow of Ruby's sign, father and daughter stood together, no longer hiding in shadows, but standing proudly in the light, ready to share whatever grace they'd been given with anyone who needed it. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Eli Turner, I handpicked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.